It's projected that we will earn $13.1 million off of the 4042 sales tax this coming year. And we're projecting interest of about $50,000 on that and sales tax reimbursement of around $100,000. Obviously, that can fluctuate greatly depending on our sales tax revenues that are coming in, and then the interest rate, as most of you are aware, is bringing nothing lately on any type of money that's in banks. So that can fluctuate greatly as we go throughout the year, and depending on whatever happens with COVID, which impacted us greatly last year, if you remember, we had to come back to the board and cut almost $2 million out of it. This year, the projection is about $1 million up from the number they gave us last year, because we ended up about 12.3 last year, and this year we're at 13.1 from the county. So that's where we're at with that projection.
Can you reference to where we were in 2019?
We were at just a little over 13.3 in 19, so we're very, very close.
I thought that it was 13 something.
It's like 13.8, so we're really, really, really close to that number. And they were shocked that we have bounced back, but there's a lot of internet sales that's playing into this instead of retail going to the store and buying. So there's a big push, obviously, with Amazon and all the orders going on, and that's helping us with our sales tax revenue. As it's been mentioned, we had $129 million worth of requests come in on this particular budget round. And last year, in comparison, we had 101. And I want to speak to that a little bit in just a few minutes on another graph. We actually have higher dollars because pricing and costing out has changed. We do have a fewer requests, and I'll get into that in a minute, overall. So this graph represents the larger buckets of where the money is being proposed to be allocated. So technology's at 27%, and as we spoke about that, that's mostly student device refresh. There's $2.4 million in there for student device refresh. And then obviously there's presentation boards for teachers. There's a breakdown of all kinds of things in there for the technology piece, which ends up a little over $3 million out of the total budget for technology. Then we have our in-kind replacement and renovations, and that is a lot to do with maintenance, transportation, items that we are having to replace or renovate and not a new project. And there's lots of that because we're trying to spread a very small amount of money over a lot of items. And then we have roofing, it's 5%. Roofing went down a little bit, and I want to talk about that because when you see the next slide, you're probably going to ask, why would roofing go down? Well, we actually shifted roofing over to Article 39 because the pricing and a lot of dollars involved with roofing. So overall, the roofing requests are more than they've ever been, but they're shifted on which fund we are trying to maximize our funds. And so a lot of this stuff, we've really looked at lottery, Article 39 and 4042, trying to maximize the effect of what we're doing for the county schools. Paving's 8%, and it stays pretty consistent. A new item that I want to bring back to your attention is security. Last year, we separated out, if you remember, security had always been called safety and ADA, and we didn't really identify it as a unique bucket. So last year we separated it out, but security mostly last year went on Article 39, and we asked for that $660,000 from the county to start that initiative based on the TRC report that we'd gotten back the feedback from. So this year, there's several items in here on security, and one of them in particular I'm going to hit at the very last of this presentation is we're asking for a security initiative for perimeter, and we'll talk about that. It's not fencing or anything like that, but we'll talk about it in more detail in just a few minutes. So there's about $1.3 million in here in security. And then the safety and ADA now looks like it's gone down, but remember, we're separating the actual description and how we're tracking it. Athletics is 8%, and equipment is 8%, and then a big, big, big difference is HVAC and energy saving. This is just energy savings, honestly, because our HVAC got pulled out, And it's on the ESSER 2 and 3 funds that we're going to talk about when Ms. Swanger presents in a minute. So this is truly just energy-saving projects, not any of them that pertain to the HVAC world. And then we still have our contingency at 5%, and that's based on board policy, and that's just a really good number to have in case a major malfunction goes wrong, and we have to have a little bit of a savings there to help us out in the long run. So here's our 40-42 allocation trend, and this is where you're seeing some swings, and there's some reclassifications, and if you look, it's hard to see, but security is just one bullet. It's yellow and only one bullet, and it hits almost on top of the energy savings one, and that's because we don't have a trend yet for that. So next year, you'll start seeing the trend line going. That's just where we fall for this year's amount, 1.3. And I've already spoken to why some roofing had gone down. If you see anything on that you want to ask a question, you're welcome to do so.
I have a question about technology. It jumped out at me more on the last slide. You answered one of my questions already, which was about HVAC and ESSER. Is technology any lower here because of ESSER?
No. We left technology almost identical in the 40-42. Well, it's actually up from last year, because as you can see on the blue line here, last year, when they cut us $2 million, technology got hit hard. When we came back together and we tried to find that $2 million, we took it out of several hundred thousand, came out, about 300,000 came out of technology last year. So we've put it back up. It's almost back up to where it was in 19. And so we've tried to maintain that level in here because we know how that impacts students. That is a direct line to students and remote learning. So we've left it in here.
So the ESSER monies for technology will be in addition to this then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is what I was talking about. I wanted to mention a few minutes ago. We had $129 million of request dollars, and we only could fund $13.3 million. In the bottom one, what's different is you can see last year we had 939 total requests, and this year we got 784 requests. So with this, we've had less requests, but our dollars for actually preparing and getting the project done has gone up, up, up. So, all right. Any questions for the budget part? If not, I'm going to turn it over to Clark.
Any sense of why we had fewer requests this year?
Yes. It came out of the, as Mr. Huff was talking about, we have an immediate needs section and we have a future items section. And there were less future items put on there this year. And there was a shift overall of the total number of projects, and most of them all came out, they did not hit the future items. We want principals to put the future items on there so we can plan and have a good idea of what's going on. And that's in the communication that I send out in October, telling the principals, please remember to think about the future. I just think there's so much on the principals' plates right now that, and on the COVID and everything else they're doing, that was not in the lineup of priorities. And I'm speaking for them, but I see the overall whelming situation that they're in.
That makes sense.
Good afternoon. Some of you have been here a while, have seen this sheet before. This is a chart representing what I call the bones of our buildings. You know, what has to be there to keep the buildings operational and to provide a safe and comfortable learning environment for the children. And it's a very simple math project. This is, you know, something you can almost do in your hands. It's just the number of items, how long they theoretically are going to live, and how much it costs to replace them. So pick anything. Let's pick domestic boilers for fun. So domestic boilers, that's what provides hot water for our cafeterias and anywhere in the building that has a need for hot water. So there's 50 of them across the county. These are large boilers. They last about 15 years. So in order to keep up, we need to be spending $133,000 every single year replacing domestic boilers. The interesting number that I'm going to show on the next slide, if I can hit the right button, is the total of those numbers is almost the entire budget that we receive in Article 4042. So as you can see, the maintenance department basically in facilities could use this entire budget to keep our buildings. And the theory behind that, if you statistically kept up with the equipment, you should never have a breakdown. Fortunately, we have a dedicated team on the maintenance department that works hard to keep equipment operational. You know, take for example, chillers. You see the life expectancy of a chiller. We have chillers operating right now that are 35 plus years old. So we have a very dedicated staff that allows us to, or we're not forced to spend this amount of money every year. Any questions on this? Is this me? Who's going? You me keep going? I'll keep going. So I wasn't prepared for the slide, but I will keep going here. So as you can see, the identified needs that we identified in the unbudgeted, so we have unbudgeted $5.7 million worth of roofing needs. The electrical needs, you can see where we didn't budget $2 million worth of electrical needs. The flooring needs, $6.3 million. So it's, you know, there's a lot of projects out there that we are not funding. Our activity buses, as you well know, the yellow buses are provided by the state of North Carolina. Activity buses are the responsibility of the counties to purchase, and they are $100,000 a piece. These are the buses that travel to sporting events and field trips when we get back into field trip world, but we have 7 buses that meet the current criteria for the 10-year, 150,000 miles that we were not able to replace.
Clark, are there any safety concerns with the activity buses not being replaced right now? Or is it more just, you know, ideally you want to replace them after the 10 years, 150,000 because of maintenance issues and breakdowns?
It is a process, and I think Clark would respond to this the same as some of those other unbudgeted. With the acceptable risk, you've got to come up with mitigating strategies with those safety risks. Some of the things that we do with our activity buses, and I'll first point out that mileage requirement is a little bit more stringent than even the yellow bus, but here's the reason for that. It's because your yellow buses typically travel locally. Your activity buses travel several counties over, and with field trips sometimes going to Charlotte. So you really do need to make that a little bit tougher on those standards to, you know, get new buses within the activity. So the mitigating strategies when you have unbudgeted like that. So what we do is we try to rotate with what I just mentioned about distance traveled. Middle schools typically will not travel in their conferences like a high school will. So we will rotate the newer buses. We'll keep the some of those new buses at the transportation so that they can be asked for by anybody in the county when they have long field trips to go, so help mitigate that safety concern. High schools, we will rotate those new buses in that have been in at the county office 2 or 3 years. We'll rotate to the high school, and then high school will rotate those buses down to the middle school, because if it were to break down and you're only one county over, we can respond a lot quicker. And the other thing that helps mitigate that is just the team of all transportation departments in the state. And I would tell you, David Roney probably has a lot of the ones that are within that 150, 200 mile, has those people's numbers on speed dial in his cell phone. So if something were to come up, that transportation department from wherever they're at can reach out and help. And then we reimburse as we need to. So to address, that's really how I answer your question with safety, is it's when you have unbudgeted, work those mitigating strategies to help address those safety concerns.
Right. Thank you for the explanation, and I appreciate you mentioning about the other counties around the state being willing to help. That's not something I even considered, so I appreciate knowing that that's out there.
I could tell you of one or two cases, even when I was doing that job, and I know it's happened since, that a bus breaking down in Raleigh, because we send folks to Raleigh sometimes, reaching out to that director of transportation in Wake County, they help us out. I will tell you locally, sometimes up here in Jackson County, when people on field trips to Western Carolina, that transportation director in Jackson County meets a lot of requests. So it is a team effort.
Thank you.
We have one more item that's a little bit different than in the past. When we were going through this, when we were talking about security, this says perimeter security for the lottery request. We have requested, and you can see on page 81, out of our 4042, we have requested $1 million come out of 4042 and $1 million out of lottery, and we're going to, Tim Fearley will be requesting approval later on the lottery application during an action item. So this will touch all 44 schools, and it's not fencing and stuff like that. It is truly the different system of getting in and out of every building as far as security and how the entrance of the many, many keys and handling multiple issues related to that. So Clark and Tim are more the experts on this large project that we are working on to change out every single school within a certain time frame in order to be more secure in that area. Do you have any questions on that? Okay. Any questions in the capital process? We also have our principals here that were among the whole process, and they're able to answer questions if you want to ask them anything as well.
Is this when we ask our specific line item questions?
I think so.
Yes, ma'am.
Pat, you want to go first?
I just had a kind of a general question for Clark, if you could speak to it. I think the public would like to know. I feel like in the years that I've served on this board, in conversations with you and others, we now run into situations where parts for maintenance of chillers and water heaters and all the different things that in the past we could have extended life longer than what we do today. Can you speak to that? And if my memory is right on that, how do you plan that? What are you doing to keep that so that we don't run into emergency type situations if we can help it? Does that make sense?
It does, and it's that has become a lot harder. Fortunately, we have a warehouse, and we try to. One reason we like standardization of equipment, so we can keep those parts that will shut a building down. Parts historically, companies don't keep parts anymore. The whole world has become, I'll ship it to you tomorrow. Well, tomorrow may not be fast enough, depending on what it is. So we try our best to keep those parts in stock that are crucial to keeping the building from freezing, from preventing, trying to prevent major extensive building damage. And sometimes we have the abilities. I remember one cold night in a winter, we sent a crew to Winston-Salem. They started building a specific pump for one of our buildings when we called them, and they painted it in the back of our truck before they painted their special color before they'd let us leave, and we installed it that night. So parts in general, though, are getting harder to get. The industry focus is, even with cars or your TV at your home, used to you could get your TV repaired. It's become a throwaway society, which makes it really hard to keep some of this equipment running. So that is a constant battle, and it's a gauge of how quickly can we get, how crucial is the equipment, and how quickly can we get it fixed should it go bad. So
And that throwaway is carrying over, I guess, to everything, buses, the equipment there and equipment in running school, the physical buildings themselves. So keeping that inventory as much as you can, my guess is, what I hear you saying is that extends the life, maybe up to the expected life, or in many cases beyond the life, because you're able to
Correct.
keep
And
those
what we
things
will
with
do
basic
too,
replacement.
as this committee and as this process approves projects, so if we are, say we're going to change the fire alarm system in this building, well, we may have 4 or 5 fire alarm systems like this somewhere else that are aging as well. We will save all the parts from this project. You know, we're putting in a brand new system in this building, but we'll keep all those parts stocked so that when something fails at one of the buildings where we have the older equipment, we have that ability to, it may be a used part, but it'll get us by for a little bit of time.
Thank you.
Add to that too, keeping in mind what you saw up there about the contingency at 5%. Within this COVID environment, we're seeing lumber prices and all those things go up. If there's a part that's not in his stock, we can always reach in, and it's not in that immediate budget. We can reach into that contingency and address that need. Not to mention, if any one of these projects that you're looking at, we come to find out with the inflated cost based on COVID, that contingency is there for that as well.
Shall I dive in?
Sure. Should I go get my book?
No, you carry it around in your head. This
I
is the
don't-
most
I-
amazing thing to me
I
every
don't
single
know.
year.
This is COVID world,
I
so
mean,
who knows?
This seems like it could be a gotcha thing, but this man is amazing to me. So, just for the public, we have a 111-page document that we're given with many, many, many things on each page, and each of us may handle this differently. What I typically do is to go through the schools in the Reynolds District and just kind of see what jumps out at me that I have questions about, as a way of educating myself about what's going on in my schools from a maintenance perspective. And then I look at the big ones at the end, which are countywide things. So I have a couple for various schools, not all schools. But for Reynolds High School, just this dispute with the DOT about Rocket Drive, is that still ongoing? Maybe that's a Tim question.
I think a simple answer to that question is yes, it's still ongoing. That's, yeah.
Okay. At some other point, I'd love to learn more about what's happening with that, but we don't need to waste our time now. And then the gate at the back that just recently got put in, the new security gates at the back of Reynolds High School. So I'll just read what this says. So I don't know how much detail we want to get into about these gates, but there's a safety issue in that students can't get into those gates when they need to. And this says, MSS is working on this now with leftover funds, but these funds will be used for automatic closing system, which doesn't seem to me like it addresses the concern of students being able to get in.
So I think facilities and technology and maintenance are all working together to, I don't know the exact status of that project, but it is in progress. Barry, Tim, do y'all know when?
So even though that wasn't
finish?
technically funded here, it is being
It's
addressed?
happening, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure, it may be by the end of the school year before we get it fixed, but it is happening.
That was my question, was just whether it was being addressed, because it wasn't clear to me on there. Cane Creek, this was just interesting to me. So it says replace non-functioning dimming console in the cafeteria, but then it says console is currently working. Did it just heal itself?
The principals changed at Cane Creek kind of during this, I think that was maybe, we didn't really know what was going on. It was working there again. That project was repaired over a year ago with technology and maintenance working together.
So it was fixed, okay. So if it says A39 in the Budget Committee comments, that means that it's referred to Article 39 and it will go forward that
Correct.
way. So even if it wasn't funded here, it's probably going to be addressed
The
somewhere else.
committee decision to, push it into that budget to
Gotcha.
attempt to,
And the same with E2 is ESSER 2, right?
Correct.
Okay. Had a question about Hawk Creek. So I gather that you are proposing that we buy those new modulars at Hawk Creek that we've been renting?
I think that, we have to re-up the lease on those mobiles.
Right.
And I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but for the remainder of the construction period, which is somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, we have to have that space.
Right, and the estimated cost here is $115,000, which is not funded, and that's because you want to buy them, is that right?
Well, what you see in that book would represent basically a year's lease.
Right, that's what I thought.
But we have that money, Tim has that money figured into the construction project of Hall Creek.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, that's why
So
it's not
that's why
funded in
it
this
didn't show
book.
up here?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there anything more we should know about buying those modulars?
And this is very simple terms. If you do the math on whether we buy them or whether we rent them and then let them go back, the cost per square foot ends up about $25 a square foot if we purchase them. I mean, in all intents and purposes, that's 10,000 square feet of space that I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Tim, but some of the addition prices you're receiving right now are well over $400 a square foot for bricks and mortar. So I think that's a decision that, we all need to discuss and figure out. But my opinion would be that it would be a good investment. They're brand new. They meet the current energy code. It's been a very successful area for the construction, and it's on its separate. It's totally separate from the building, power-wise, all the utilities.
Feels more like a real building than a modular to me in there.
It does. It's a new style of what they call mod pods. They can just add to them or take them away. It's a nice setup. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Centrally located, yeah. So even though we, try to get away from modulars and we're trying to use fewer modulars in this case because they're newer and it would be such a good investment, that's the reasoning?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're brand new. I mean, and they're necessary evils. That same square footage, it's roughly 10,000 square feet. So you're talking a lot of money to build that bricks and mortar. And we have our majority of our modular fleet at this moment ranges between 20 and 25 years old. And they're still in pretty decent shape. The expected lifespan of a modular is somewhere around 30 years. So if we stretch that out, that's a pretty good investment for a 30-year investment.
Okay. Okay. So now, my other questions are not about specific Reynolds District schools, but one line item in the admin services building was to remove the sorghum trees in front of the building. Why do they need to be removed?
So unfortunately, those trees produce a fruit that is in a ball shape that to date, and we have at least 3 rather large workers' comp claims related to the fruit and falling on those trees.
So it's like a tripping hazard sort of a thing on the sidewalk?
Yeah, and it's almost impossible. They drop so much fruit, it's hard to keep that cleaned when that happens. So our intent is to remove those, but to replace those trees with an acceptable tree that's more conducive to pedestrian traffic, and that's the real intent of that project.
That makes sense.
Perhaps a tree that won't trip up our employees. That sounds like a behavioral issue for those trees.
We thought about buying everybody boots, but, they weren't up for that.
I'm not sure who this one is a question for, so I'll come back to that one. But on vehicles, I noticed that one of the vehicles that is not scheduled to be replaced is from the year 2001. So it's a 20-year-old car. Is that just one that does not ever get used, or why would we hang on to a 20-year-old car?
That's a good question.
Somebody loves that car.
So if you look at the whole vehicle list, we have 220-something vehicles. I can't remember the exact number, but and unfortunately, they become part of the cut. When we're trying to make decisions, do we, make sure we have something in a building for a school and for the children, or do we have a vehicle? And there's a fine line between that. But some of these cars are not driven like they should be. In my opinion, You know, if you're not driving 8,000+ miles a year, then it really needs to be in a pool-type setting. And I think that's something we're working on to work on some of the vehicles that don't get driven like they should. Because cars are really hard to get parts for after a certain age. They just stop manufacturing them. You can't keep them running. So, you know, our focus on vehicles has always been keeping a high priority on maintenance and technology vehicles that actually carry technicians that keep the schools operational. If it carries just someone to a school for fun, then that's not as high a priority as someone that can actually keep the building running.
Okay. Yeah, I just had a concern about sending our employees out in a 20-year-old car, and are they going to get stranded by the side of the road somewhere? So, my last question is maybe not for you, I don't know. Every other single page, except for on the communications page, it's specific items that we need to pay for. And the communications page is just $10,000, basically, as I read this, stuff we might need over the course of the year. And this is not at all a slam on the communications department. They have always continued to do an amazing job for us, and I want to make sure that they get what they need. But I'm just wondering why this one department is handled differently than the other departments.
I just don't think that they itemized each individual item because they're, you know, in theory, that there's supposed to be a $1,000 expense for a capital item, a capitalized item. So maybe that's why they bunched the stuff together, because if you separate this microphone from this computer, from this whatever that they need, it may not fit that category. So they bundle their needs together. It's almost like a furniture and equipment type thing. It's definitely, and that's a small amount for that team of.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's a kosher thing to do in terms of capital expenses, to group them like items together, even though they may cost less than $1,000.
Cindy,
Okay.
I happen to be privy to a conversation on this one item, and Ms. Harris had requested to submit her budget like that because her rationale was, as the year progressed, there would be different needs that came through rather than asking for specific things at the beginning, and she asked for that fluidity.
Because they can't necessarily project.
Right, so who knows?
Right. Thank you, and as always, you're brilliant. Appreciate it.
Well, you passed the test, Mr. Wyatt.
Not over yet. Anyone else? It is over. Thank y'all.
Okay, Dr. Baldwin?
Yeah, I just want to tip the hat off to the process, along with the staff and their dedication. You know, I've been in this business quite a few years, and I continue to say this is one of the best models of collaboration and respect that you can find within a school system. It's masterful. I think you heard $129 million worth of requests. I don't know the exact number of total requests. Tina, do you know ballpark? What would you say? 783. Okay, give or take a few. What I want the board to understand and the public to understand is every single one of those requests was verbally addressed. It was spec'd out by Clark, by Tim and our team, Barry Pace involved with technology. So every single request by the school, whether good, bad, in between, it was discussed in front of this committee. I just think that's incredible, especially when you consider the size of our school system. But every school had an equal chance to put those requests in. And every request, regardless of whether it came from Barnardsville, one of our smallest schools, or T.C. Robertson High School, our largest school, was equally given attention. And I also want to just reference something from being an old principal. And I've talked to so many principals, and including a number of these that are on the committee this year, some for the first time. And I constantly hear that this is one of the best experiences they have had as an administrator serving on any committee for our school system. And you wonder why. Now think about the pressure that these guys had. $129 million of requests, and they had to narrow that down to $13 million. I mean, think about that. And they also represented, when they walked in the room, they not only represented their school, but their district. But it's amazing to see how we work together as a family, because no one gets an advantage. And when they're in there discussing these, again, everyone is treated equally, whether they be a representative from the Owen district, and you're talking about North Buncombe, or wherever in the county. And it's just marvelous. And if you want to learn about this school system, this is one of the best ways, because you see the entire picture. Again, just want to take my hat off to just how incredible this process is. And I also believe this is at the foundation of why our school system, when you look at the difference in ages in our buildings, probably we've got 80-some years difference in the oldest and the newest. Clark, would you say somewhere in that category or more years? About 90-some in the range between the oldest and the newest. It's amazing when you look at the quality of care and how well our facilities have been maintained. And this is at the core of it. It all begins with planning and prioritization, and that is what this process does so beautifully. So again, hats off to the process, and equal hats off to all of those involved in making this process successful. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Certainly. And it's also a big factor in the equity that the board has for all of our schools. And we go to this process, not to take away from Dr. Baldwin what he has said, but we have managed to create a system that protects against haves and have-nots. And I personally am very appreciative of that, and I'm sure every board member is as well. I believe it's time for Mr. Fearley, is that correct? Well, no, wait just a minute. Are we supposed to have a break
There's a
before we do
10-minute break.
Tim Fearley? We are supposed to have a break. We have a few-minute break here before. If you guys think you're getting out of class early, you're wrong. We'll go to break.
They're running for the hills.
calling on Mr. Fairley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the Enrollments and Facilities Needs Report. We're going to look at 3 parts here, and there is a significant amount of information back in the appendix for your leisurely reading that's back up, but we won't get into it in here unless you have a question. First, we're going to look at the membership and population trends. We're going to look at some long-range planning issues, and then at the end, we're going to make some recommendations for your consideration. This report typically has been given at this time, and then we give you a month to discuss, make suggestions, discuss with Dr. Baldwin so that we can come to consensus. And at the June meeting, you'll be asked to accept this report. What that will do is allow staff to go to the School Capital Fund Commission in the fall and make requests for prioritized funding projects. So in the past, before my time, Mary Parker and Marshall Roberts developed a projection system for predicting enrollments 5 years out at each school, and it's been pretty successful. I think it started because we used to hire consultants to do that, and their projections were so far off that Mr. Roberts and Ms. Parker thought they could do it better, and I think they have. There's some subjectivity, there's a lot more local information. The other source for projections is the Department of Public Instruction, and that's what you're going to see here, because this year I had no clue how to project out 5 years because no one seemed to be able to tell me how many kids would come back next year. It was such an unusual year. So you're seeing an abbreviated chart here that only has projections for next year, and they're provided by DPI. So this year is going to kind of throw a kink into our trends. Because this system has been going on for so long and these projections have been being made, we learn a little bit each year from them, but we also develop trends that we can project off of as well. That's really good information. A one-year glitch is not a trend, but if we see similar issues at a school or a grade level, more particularly at a grade level within a school, that really helps our predictions for how many kids may be there. And it's helped us plan so that we can get out in front of a construction project, let's say, that couldn't take 2 years to be initiated. There are, of course, administrative policies and tools that you can use to address membership versus capacity issues, but if it's a facilities solution, it usually takes quite a long time. So I'm not going to go into the details of this chart. You can study it, but I will go over the general features of it and the meaning of the colors and such. So you see all our schools listed on the left. You see the current capacity in the current membership in that first column. We color code green, green, kind of orange, green, yellow, orange, and red. If it's green, green is good. We're in good condition. We don't have a membership versus capacity issue. If we start getting close to capacity, we're going to color code that for you yellow. And if we're beyond capacity, and we'll talk about how we could possibly be on capacity and still function, we'll show it as orange. And then red is we're kind of well beyond capacity. In the past, we've had a lot more orange and red on this chart. we're in pretty good condition, really, because I would say primarily because of the construction that the board authorized of the intermediate schools. The intermediate schools took one grade level out of the middle schools where we had a lot of capacity issues, and it took a grade level out of the elementary schools in those districts and really helped us kind of kill two birds with one stone, if you will. And it's been really fortunate that we did that because of the K-3 class size reduction that has been phased in. We would be in deep trouble trying to put less kids in our elementary K-3 classes in the buildings we had, but because that grade level has been removed, we're in pretty good shape. Our issues are more structural, if you will. We still have quite a few modulars and safety issues. We have infrastructure issues that we're trying to deal with. And we have a really changing curriculum, a method of delivering instruction that trying to be responsive to. So you see those first two columns are current membership, and then DPI's projection next year. I think you'll see at the bottom, and I'm sorry this is so hard to read. You'll have to look at your books. They're pretty dense, but DPI is showing a very slight increase in our membership next year. I can't vouch for that, and I just don't know how to address that within our, due to COVID, really. So as we continue across, there's a couple of ways, there's multiple ways of measuring capacity. DPI has a very specific methodology that is a one-size-fits-all methodology, formula-driven, and that you will see in the DPI 2022 capacity numbers there. We just reported to DPI and to the county as well our report for membership capacity and needs in 2020. Every 5 years we need to do that. And so on each side of the DPI capacity, which is kind of down the middle, is what we're calling functional capacity. And that's really how Buncombe County Schools uses our buildings. We have programs that are funded by the county commissioners, local programs that have staff that require spaces. So the concept of functional capacity is to look at our spaces and our programs and match things up so that we accommodate those programs that are funded. Typically, functional capacity is going to be less than the DPI capacity. The theoretical common core capacity goes the other way. It looks at a school and says, if we had to just provide core programs and we maxed out the use of those schools, how many kids could we fit in there? So that's typically the higher number. So we've kind of triangulated the concept of capacity. And then you come to our core capacity. So those are the cafeterias and the media centers. How do they relate to the capacity, the overall capacity of the school? If you do an addition to a school and add 6 classrooms on, but don't increase the cafeteria or the media center, you may be in for a problem that you have the capacity in the classrooms, but you're having trouble. Now, I will qualify that and say the media center formula that DPI uses, I believe to be not reflective of certainly Buncombe County Schools' instructional model. Basically, the media center has gone to the classrooms with all the technology we have out there. So I would take the media center numbers with a grain of salt. DPI still is looking for places to store your projector in the back of the room. Well, come on, we don't do that anymore. We have things like TV studios and things like that. So I put it up here because it is a DPI review requirement, but it really, we're in pretty good shape, other than a couple of schools. Estes is one of them that has just too small of a cafeteria, really, for the number of students. So what our folks have done as a coping capacity is not use the kind of the 3 seating method that DPI looks at. Hey, you take 1/3 of your kids, they're in the cafeteria, have lunch, and then leave. Well, that's not how we do it anymore. We move kids in and out, and our principals are pretty creative. They have to start lunch earlier, maybe end later, and they bring classes in and out very efficiently. We report modulars, and in the back of the book, you'll see our modular report as well. Those are the number of classrooms, so some modulars are 2 classrooms, some are single modulars, but those are the number of modulars we have at each school. And that ties back to how those schools over on the left, when they are pushing or beyond their capacity, deal with the number of students they have. Modulars are typically not counted in the capacity. They're considered temporary uses. So if we're holding classes out there because we're overcrowded, or we've developed an art modular that works, it does relieve some of the overcrowding that might be in a school. So some of the schools that are shown in yellow, and we only have 1 school in orange, that's North Buncombe Middle. They've got 7 modulars, so they can really deal with that. Glenarden has a lot of modulars, 13. So North Buncombe Elementary has a lot of modulars. So that's their way of dealing with it. Other coping capacities are to put art on a cart, those types of things. Again, our principals are really good at that. But those numbers do not really count the effects of modulars. They're simply reported. And then finally, in this chart, you'll see a utilization rate. And that's based on that functional capacity, the Buncombe County Schools' use of it. Typically, you want to be efficient, you want to be around 90, maybe as high as 95 capacity. So it's the membership versus capacity, that proportion. If your school gets up in, we're looking at Fairview at 101% utilization, that's over capacity, if you will, but they've got 5 modulars, and they're using coping capacities or coping mechanisms to deal with that. The other schools that are kind of in that yellow zone, Williams Elementary that we're going to talk about in a little while, North Buncombe Middle, again, they have a bunch of modulars, but we will talk about that one as well. Avery's Creek has 4 modulars, and it's an area of concern. We added on an art and a music room there that freed up 2 classrooms. Again, it's hard to know. There's a lot of development how many kids we're going to get out of those. Glenarden is pushing their capacity, but they have 13 modulars, and all those modulars except 1 were there when I started, so they're old. Estes also, but in general, I think we're in better shape than probably most school systems, and I think the intermediate schools are a big reason for that. Any questions on this?
I have some questions. One is just to point out for the public that these capacity numbers are all based on pre-COVID. So none of this takes into consideration 3-foot spacing or 6-foot spacing or anything like that. This is all as if COVID was not
The capacity does not count.
So,
And I should remind you that these numbers for the membership is based on the best one of two in last fall, fall of '20. So DPI, we report to DPI. DPI publishes in the first 2 months, whichever number is higher, first month or the second month. And that's the number we have been using for all these years.
So one question, just out of curiosity, the DPI capacity, does that take into consideration the modulars, or is
No.
that's just the bricks and mortar?
Bricks and mortar.
Okay. And I'm surprised to see Fairview and Orange, considering all the construction that we've done. Does this surprise you?
No.
No.
We knew it would be here. That's why we have planned Phase 2.
Okay, so this does not take Phase 2 into consideration?
No, it doesn't. So we did, by moving the II program to Hawk Creek and
Right.
renovating that wing, we did get 5 classrooms. But Fairview has been very popular for accepting discretionary admission and trying to control that a little bit, but when you have a brother and sister that are already there, so that's a challenge. It's been a very popular school, and that's good. It's a good problem to have.
Right.
But we know that what we did last time was kind of a cost-effective stopgap method for dealing with that, and we do have a Phase 2, but we need to see who comes back.
Okay, so Phase 2 is queued up.
It's there, it's been schematically up to the design development level. We've had a contractor involved who's given us prices, and probably if we didn't have other issues in the county, that would be at the top of our list, but we're hoping we put the finger in the dike and bought us a little bit of time. We'll see who comes back, in the fall, and we'll reevaluate next year.
Okay.
So we're going to slice and dice the numbers on just a few slides, and then we're going to get to kind of our long-range plan. But what happened last year during COVID was very different than what happened in previous years. So we show you a number of ways of looking at the membership at schools, and we list our schools, and you can see the comparison on the far right column of what the change was from last year, and most every school lost kids. We lost, you can see the total in the bottom right there, we lost 1,516 kids last year. And then they're highlighted by the largest gains. Any school that gained over 20, early college gained over 20. But some of the schools, Hominy Valley gained 5 kids. They gained kids in a COVID year. So I think that's pretty unusual. Like I said, we used to, and have all these years, projected out 5 years. This looks at our projections that we made last year, pre-COVID. If COVID didn't happen, we would have expected a certain number of kids at every school. These 5 schools really met or exceeded what our pre-COVID projections were, which I think is unusual. I can't tell you why, but Robertson, Owen High, Valley Springs Middle, very close. They only lost 1 kid from our projections, not from what they had last year, but what we thought they would have based on that projection system. Emma and Johnston only lost 5, whereas most schools lost, were well below our projections. So if we look at the 6-year trend of membership, you can see that between 1819 and 1920, we had kind of leveled off after numerous years of losing kids. And last year it plummeted again. So I want to show you this in comparison to the state average of schools. It looks almost identical, right? On the average of state schools, they had almost leveled off last year. And then we've had this kind of disastrous drop here. So there you see the comparison again. Very, very similar to the rest of the state. So where were those losses? Well, I think a big part of it was families just not bringing their kindergartens and enrolling them in school. They're not required to. And you can see the kindergarten trend over the years going up, 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 big jump last year, and then a big dive. So someone else is going to have to tell me how many kids will come next year. I don't know. Well, it may be that all those kids that didn't come plus the regular number, and that number will shoot up. It'll be interesting to see next year. So here's all those elementaries. See that kindergarten that we just saw right here. First grade gained some. Again, I'm not sure, excuse me, I'm not sure why, but the other elementaries up to fourth grade did lose some. But kindergarten was the biggest difference that I saw. And then virtual schools. So these are the two statewide virtual schools, and you can see the North Carolina Virtual Academy basically kept right on track. I will say that the North Carolina Cyber Academy that took that dip there, they had issues. They changed their whole administration. They changed their delivery company. So they had a couple of issues a few years ago, but they've kind of bounced back a little bit. Buncombe County Schools transfer data. So where did those kids go that transferred out of Buncombe County Schools? And the two highest were homeschool and private parochial schools, whereas city schools and charter school, Asheville City Schools, and our charter schools in the county, they dropped a bit. So I would attribute that they had alternative pod systems, homeschool, of course, just get your kid out of that environment and bring them home. I think it's probably easily explained why that happened last year. Again, another way of showing similar information but broken down into those individual charter schools and city schools. So on the left, you'll see the trend last year of the transfers out of our system and into other school systems. This year, exaggerated for homeschool and private parochial schools, whereas quite a few less transfers into the city schools and the charters. Grade level transfers. So at what grade level do kids typically transfer out of? The chart on the left has been really consistent for the last, 5 to 10 years, that in the middle schools are where most of the transfers occur. Last year, this past year, the year that we're in, it looks a whole lot different. A lot of earlier elementary transfers, and that's why we focused on elementary. So this is an unusual year. It's interesting, but I can't explain it all. And then the other side of the coin is transfers into Buncombe County Schools. You know, there's a lot of movement, and this details all our schools on the left and where they go. We track them. When a record is requested, our folks track that and send their student records off so we know where they're going. And the ones highlighted in yellow were the ones that had the highest transfers into Buncombe County Schools. So that's about all we're going to look at in the membership and capacity. We're in pretty good shape, really. We're going to go into some of the other issues that we have that aren't directly, in every case, attributed to capacity. That may be a contributing factor. Questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Are we taking into consideration that it's very likely that we're going to get a lot of those homeschool kids and private school kids back next year? Because a lot just left for COVID.
It's hard to predict how many. Yeah, it's taken into consideration, but I can't put numbers up there. All I can tell you is that the schools with capacity issues probably will be further pressured.
Okay.
Any other questions before we move on to kind of some long-range planning issues?
I maybe have one for Dr. Baldwin. I know in the past we've had discussions and a variety of people within the school system when we've had students leaving where we've actually reached out to them and with phone calls and some schools have actually gone and knocked on doors and those types of things. Are we still doing some of those kind of things, or do we have some plans to do that? Because especially with the homeschool numbers, those are so astronomically higher, and we've always had high numbers, but those numbers are a good bit higher than some of the other locations where kids have gone in the past, and I'm just wondering where we are on that as a system.
I believe that process has already begun. A lot of our principals are reaching out. A lot of that reach out is tied in now to the whole recovery effort. Just not only recovery of students within the building, but students that were initially there that are no longer there. So, and I also think in terms of the other component that's going to come on board for us that I think will address some of that is our virtual academy. And of course, the thoughts with our virtual academy is the opportunity to expand down into the lower grades. So I see both of those efforts at the school level and also with the virtual academy as being connected.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just want to add, and this is just speaking from the relationships that I have with parents in the community. I think we really need to be prepared for a lot of those kids to come back. I think that's going to happen. A lot of my friends, they decided to send their kids to full-time school this year because they couldn't manage the virtual. And then a lot of them just decided to homeschool because it was easier than checking in. But a lot of them have the intent to send the kids back. And I think it's really important that we're preparing for that on the front end.
That's good news.
That's a good point. I think where Mr. Fairley has gone with kindergarten, though, at least from my standpoint, is going to be a real concern for us.
Yeah.
Because if kindergartners are held out, then essentially they've gained a year and they come back, so now where is the placement? And I see that's going to be a real challenge. So again, as early as we can get, to your point, as early as we can get those commitments for planning purposes, the better, because I believe you're exactly right. That could create some real spacing issues in a hurry for us.
Is there talk of trying to get those red shirt kids, for lack of a better word, but it's been going on forever? I mean, we considered doing that with my kindergartner just because of COVID. Are we going to try to make a push for them, some of them, to enter first grade rather than kindergarten?
That's an extremely good question. I'm going to let Ms. Reed, I know that's in her area of expertise, and I know that's been on the center of her plate.
Yes, is the short answer. We have a special assessment that we have created for those students who are kind of, I think as you said, kind of red-shirted this year a bit. Some of those have officially enrolled in a homeschool. Some of those have unofficially enrolled in homeschool. Either way, we're going to do a really thorough assessment of where those students are right now in relation to what's expected of a typical first grader as they enroll into the next school year.
Will it still be, what if a parent's totally against that idea and they don't want their student to miss out on kindergarten? Will it always end up going back to that, or are we going to force the issue?
It's a collaborative decision. So I think that with any decision, even with retention on the table, you want to look at a well-rounded set of data. You want to listen to the concerns of the parent, and ultimately the decision is to set that child up for success.
I have a question before you walk away. With some of our summer learning that we're going to be offering, is there opportunities for those who decided to not go to kindergarten last year to participate in some of this summer learning, or would they have had to been enrolled already?
So for the summer learning program, the actual BCS Summer Academy, they would have had to have participated in school this year, but we are hopeful to offer a transition program for incoming kindergarten students.
And that transition program would be in the summertime also?
It would be, probably, most likely just before school starts.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I'm glad she asked that. I did have one more question, because I have gotten this question in the community. What if the elementary age student did go to a private school this past year, but they are returning to Buncombe County Schools next school year? Are they eligible for the Summer Learning Academy?
They would have to be enrolled currently as a student.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
The long-range planning section, we're going to look at 4 schools that we've done what we call advanced planning studies. We have identified issues either with capacity versus membership, with building code issues, with ADA, with building infrastructure issues, or more likely a combination of all of them. And we brought on experienced architects that have done, and their design team, plumbing, mechanical, electrical folks, to take a look at these schools and offer a kind of a educated third-party recommendations for these and give us options, and also do some budgeting. So we'll start with Glen Arden. This is not in priority order. You're going to see a priority list of projects a little later in the recommendations section. But Glen Arden, we started earliest on that because we thought that last year that was going to be our most significant concern this year. Well, other things have happened. Glen Arden is an open plan school, and you'll see a commonality between 3 of these. We're working on Haw Creek Elementary, which is an open plan school, and if you don't know what that is, you probably do, but in the late 70s and early 80s, the concept of having a big room with maybe 4 classrooms and 4 teachers, 4 classrooms of kids in an undivided room was a trend, and numerous schools across the country got built with that concept in mind. It is not in favor now, and at every Buncombe County school that was an open plan school, and we even have one high school, Irwin High School was an open plan high school. They have been, over the years, kind of closed up and look more like a traditional school with corridors and divisions between classrooms and sound barriers and all that good stuff. The problem is there are significant code requirements when you do that, and an open plan school doesn't necessarily lend itself to modern building code configurations. So most of these open plan schools, the way they're configured now, do not meet current building code, and they don't function great because of the sound issues and ADA issues and such. So Novus Architects, who's done numerous schools for us, did a very in-depth study of Glen Arden. We involved our technology department and our maintenance department a whole lot in this because the building has potential capacity issues, ADA issues, building infrastructure and building envelope. That's the walls and roof and such, as well as all the equipment, the mechanical equipment, the electrical system. It's a challenge. So I asked him to look at 2 things. What would it take to renovate this school, bring it up to modern standards and meet building codes, and also to renovate the administration area that is remote from the front door to align with our security protocol. And I also asked them to look at, well, what would it take to, should we tear it down and start over again? And they looked at both, and I'll give you the punchline now. They are very close in cost to do that, to do both of those. The problem with renovation, of course, is disruptive. I've asked them, as well as some of the others, to look at a potential 10% population/membership growth at the school. This neighborhood, when I first got here, was a lot of young families, and there, you know, it was really cranking. And then it seemed to age out a little bit. Maybe those families got older, didn't have kids, and that population trend that was soaring kind of leveled out or decreased. Now, I believe that it's coming back. It's affordable, it's a walkable neighborhood. I think there's a lot of young families there that might go here. That's all subjective, but let's look at a 10% potential growth to make sure we don't plan something that's obsolete before we even consider it. And in order to do that, they've developed a plan to add an addition which provides swing space for renovating the remainder of the school. That's always the challenge in a renovation project. We don't have a spare school here or there that we can move all the kids out and renovate. We have to kind of do it in place, and that's what we're doing at Hawk Creek, very similar. This is a school that you'll note has the most modulars in the system as well, and they are, again, in that 30-year range, so they're pushing their limits, and Clark has a lot more maintenance issues and costs associated with those older modulars. The modulars prevent safety/security issues because the kids have to go between them as well. So this area that's highlighted in purple would be an addition that would allow, and a couple of modulars removed there, would meet that 10% ultimate increase in capacity and would provide the swing space to allow a phased renovation of the school itself. And here's a look. I won't go into the details, but pretty detailed study. Is that if we're going to do this, can we really do it? And you really need to look at this level of detail in order to involve a contractor and get good construction cost estimates. So here's kind of an overall plan. That area in red is that addition. The area in green is outdoor space. It's where the modulars sit now. Some modification of the traffic. We would keep the gymnasium and the building, the rest of the building, and towards the top, that's a relatively new addition. It's only 20 years old, and that's this it right here. So that's pretty much a code-compliant building built 20 years ago. Yeah, it needs some mechanical equipment last 20 years, but that's in-kind change out. This is the new construction plan, that red area, and more significant modification of the drop-off pickup and buses to the top. Again, it came out within $1 million of each, which when you're talking $25 million to do a job, that's pretty darn close. So it is not the top priority right now. They're functional. Their capacity isn't to that point. Those modulars are still functional. Unfortunately, we have higher needs than this right now, but at least we have a game plan that will help us react more quickly once we see what the numbers are and monitor it. And you know, we have cash flow issues. We can't just do everything we would like to do. We have to prioritize. The next school we looked at, and we are currently initiating phase 1 of this, is Estes Elementary. Estes Elementary lost its 5th grade to Anka Intermediate years ago. their membership is almost back to where it was when we built the intermediate school. So there's a pretty good trend of increased membership there. And guess what? It's an open plan school and has significant issues. It also houses our district-wide PEP program for the elementary level, and it's busting at the seams as well. So this is kind of a laundry list of the identified needs at the school and a kind of a layout of the school. We are doing this summer the first phase, this 3-classroom addition up here, and hopefully, again, that will be kind of a finger in the dike, and we'll see what happens with our membership in the fall. The architect, this is Paget Freeman, who is an experienced school architect as well. They've identified potential expansion of classroom rings, but it's very limited here because of the topography drops right off. They've shown you could put one classroom on the end of each of those wings. That's expensive construction when you do a little bit here and a little bit there, not preferred, but I asked them to show us all possibilities. Other issues that are at the forefront of this school is this office, the front entrance of the door is buried deeply in, this is not really showing up on there, but it's kind of buried deeply in from the parking lot. And this game plan, what you see in red, pulls the administration into the area of a classroom wing so that they're at front and center and right on the parking lot. They have good visual access to the parking lot and a controlled entrance. The school over to the right of that red blotch is the purple area is a special needs area that would get potentially renovated. They have a lot of scattered visiting professionals all around this school, and a big part of this is an attempt to consolidate them that work closely together, to give them some more cafeteria space by borrowing some of that space and relocating folks, redoing the administration. And then over to the far left is a potential new classroom wing that could serve, if there was a significant or continuing increase in membership there, could address that, and would also give us that swing space again that you need when you renovate. When you want to put the office into a classroom wing, you need a space to put those kids. And at Haw Creek, we did modulars there. And we built an addition. Modulars they're not cheap, but it's what we were kind of forced to do. If we can address a membership issue, functional issues, and do bricks and mortar, that will be a more permanent solution and not be leasing modulars, probably a better solution. Another school we looked at, and this is kind of an update of a previous master plan or advanced planning study. It's kind of a relook at it because it was quite a few years ago, and we've done a bunch of work there. Most of the work we've done is exterior to the building, though. We did a new car rider entrance. We expanded the bus area, relocated them to the back, so we have a much better conditions for car rider drop-off and pickup, and for buses. It's again, all our middle schools other than Valley Springs and Cane Creek were built in the mid-50s, and they were all built with dead flat roofs, just dead flat. Well, as the rain hits it and they sag a little bit, that roof sags from the weight, or just over time, more water can pond. That makes it sag a little more, which has more capacity, more water. So what we've typically done in our middle schools is put an overlay of a sloped metal roof. That will be a 50-year roof. It will outlast us more than likely. And we've done a lot of that work there, but we're only about halfway through. So with fresh eyes, we're looked at this school. The school still has a bunch of modulars, and we've seen a fair bit of growth there and some pressure on the capacity of the school. The reason it functions is the modulars. So if you start at the top there, the identified issues are to make an interior pathway from the main building to the gymnasium, which is to the upper right. Metal re-roofing, that's a continuation of that program. We have active leaks, and it just doesn't make sense to patch or put back the same sort of roof there. The addition and renovation is the biggest part that we looked at. Middle schools operate, and this one does very well in a kind of a teams approach. So they have, Tanya, 3 or 4 classes that kind of move together, share the same teachers. And this addition to replace those modulars would put the entire 7th grade into one wing. They don't have that now. They're scattered. And then the existing wing just to the top of where that's pointing to addition and renovation would become kind of the specials. So we work closely with the school staff and Tanya to develop a program that we think would work there. And then they have a pretty bad food lab that's was on the list as well. And a lot of schools ask for a gender-neutral restroom. That's hard to upfit, so we put that in there. Probably the highest priority, and what we're going to recommend, though, is a softball field at this school. It's our only middle school without an on-campus softball field to play. They have to go to the high school. They share it with the JV. They have to wait till about 4:30. Capital outlay funded, recognized that, and funded last year a study to see where on this very compact campus that also has a lot of topography, where is it feasible to get a softball field on there? And this is really Plan B. We've looked at multiple plan. One plan involved purchasing property. The adjacent landowner rejected that, but we did find a place for it. It's not the easiest thing, but it is in the area of the baseball field and the football/soccer stadium there. It is about 40 feet above it, though. There's a very steep grade there, and there's a lot of beautiful trees. It's not ideal, but it does fit. And that you will see in our recommendations as a very high priority for equity purposes to provide this school with a on-campus softball facility. Look at the future floor plan and kind of diagrammatically. I won't go into that, but that wing with the notches in it would be the new addition. The rest is minor renovations or intermediate level of renovations. Finally, W.D. Williams is really at the top of our list. Clark, a couple of years ago, got funding in capital outlay to do a mechanical system upgrade. It's simply worn out, and he couldn't do it. The building department, his designer, identified the school open plan issues, and we cannot meet the building code. We have to kind of stick where we are, and those systems are totally worn out. So we got together with that mechanical designer and invited another architect that has done a lot of schools to take a look and see what we needed to do to bring it up to code, to update the infrastructure of the school, to meet the ADA issues as well as security issues. In addition, this school appears to be under a lot of pressure for its membership versus capacity. There's been a lot of really affordable development in the area, and because of this open plan, it's really difficult to get many more kids in there. So the phase one that you're going to see in the in the recommendations is to request from the School Capital Fund Commission $5 million to build a new media center and a classroom expansion on the school. The remaining portion would have to happen in other years, but we really need this media center and classroom addition to act as our swing space and help us renovate the rest of the school, and it will simultaneously address the infrastructure issues we have throughout the school. So here's the existing floor plan. It kind of stair steps down, which creates a real challenge as far as accessibility and such, and floor levels don't line up. We looked at 3 options. One is, you see that pink there, that fuchsia is the media center. In this option, it remains the same, and we build a classroom and a support wing at the lower side where you see the yellow and such. And then that would allow the swing space to go back into those open plan classrooms and renovate them with real walls and real doors and be able to do the remainder of the infrastructure and mechanical systems. It would also allow renovation of the administration area, which it really falls short in support areas, but also does not meet our security protocol at all because the entrance is separate from the administration. You can get in and go right down a hall either way without really coming into the office.
Where's the front entrance of the building on this drawing?
So, well, the front entrance is an interesting question. The cars park up here and actually come in here and, go to the rest. Here's the admin.
Right.
The bus lot, which used to be the front entrance car lot, is right here. So really, it's kind of a trick question. The front entrance is here, but this is used mostly by drop-off pickup up here, and it's really remote from the admin. So the second game plan was kind of a similar to the other one. Media center, however, gets moved out of the middle. It was here, and it gets moved out here. This wasn't favored because the media center is maybe a little too remote. The advantage of having a kind of a media center that's somewhat isolated is that it allows after-school activities to take place without opening up your entire school to all those visitors and such, running up and down the corridors. And so it wasn't preferred. It seemed to be slightly better. This is where we ended up and what we asked our architects to work with a contractor to give us budget costs and develop a phasing plan from. So the media center that was here, basically a new media center gets built here and a new 4 classroom addition here. So that becomes our swing space for renovating all these pods in a phased manner, and ultimately the administration area. It gives us a place that we can set up classrooms in this big open area, put temporary partitions in, and relatively inexpensively use that as our swing space as well as these 4 classrooms, and it addresses that 10% potential increase in membership. And all these advanced planning studies, I believe you have been emailed them, Kim, is that right? So they're linked, they're pretty intense. These are just excerpts, and you're welcome to look through those. These are just a few excerpts, and I'm glad to work through them with you as well, if you like. This is a kind of a blow-up of the administration new game plan that would meet our security protocol and provide those support areas that they're lacking. And then this just runs through the phases. I'll go through very quickly, but you can see the media center moving out, that purple, and the new classrooms. That is what we're asking for and recommending to you to approve, to ask the School Capital Fund Commission to begin this process. Here's the kind of the phasing plan, and if you go through that, they've worked out a detailed plan. It's doable, it works, and the contractor was able to more closely provide a budget price. So the phase 2, the administration could be renovated at any time in the process as opposed to the classroom pods, but it really has to happen over summer. So those are the 4 main studies we did. There are other issues, obviously, in the district. We don't cover all those. Capital outlay tries to address a number, but the things that have long lead times is what I'm trying to hit here. So in the recommendations, kind of summarizing this, I'm going to show you the recommended Article 39 or School Capital Fund Commission proposed requests that we have. Would like your consideration, input, and prioritization. Secondly, we touched on the Hawk Creek modular purchase. We'll look at that. We're currently leasing those. And then a summary chart of the cash flow for lottery. So we divide our School Capital Fund Commission requests into high priority and second priority. And we kind of use it as a planning document. We know that the funding that's available to the School Capital Fund Commission through Article 39 is not going to be able to go completely through our requests. But we're putting them out there, and we're putting out high priority requests as well as the next priority as kind of a planning document. Here's what's in the future. This is coming our way. It'll get reprioritized, but we've divided these this year into kind of 3 areas. Major renovations and the security initiative, you'll see. The highest priority roofing projects, as well as infrastructure. We have really not been able to do much in terms of infrastructure in School Capital Fund Commission for the last few years because of the lack of funding and also the critical needs, Haw Creek and such. So you see, last year we asked for a county-wide security upfit, and this allows us to do a lot of things at a lot of schools, like put lower cost things like security film on windows, keying, access control, cameras, a lot of smaller things. And City Schools has likewise asked for a similar number so that we can hit a lot of schools with a lot of improvements. The lobby security upfit that you see at the bottom of that is one big project for a lobby reconfiguration and an entrance at a school. As we're doing Haw Creek and as we get to Glenarden and Williams, we'll fix those lobbies and those offices to conform to our security prototype. But this would do one that's high on the list and would allow us to do construction over the following summer. This softball field at North Buncombe Middle School, a high dollar project because of the huge retaining wall we're going to have to build. We're really locked in on this site. We got nowhere to go. We got cliffs and streams to deal with. But this site seems to work. We've met with the neighbors that would be directly affected, with the principal and assistant principal, and showed them our plan, expecting them to jump all over us. But I can't say they were happy about it, having a softball field in their backyard, but we really were surprised and they were appreciative that we were showing it to them, and I think they kind of thought it was inevitable. So that's a very high priority. There's your first phase of Williams that would set us up to be able to renovate the remainder of the school. North Buncombe Middle would be that secure connection between the main building and the gymnasium. And then our lobby security upfit, roofing, and then some of those categories that you saw on the infrastructure list that Clark talked about, just trying to hit something from each of those so Clark can get some spare parts so that he can address his worst case and keep us up and running. Reynolds High School stadium lighting is the last track that we haven't done, and in order to really do that, we have to do the lighting first, because no one will drive on this new track to change an incandescent light bulb with a crane, because this track will cost over $1 million to redo. So we really need to do the stadium lighting first with LED lighting that has the things that break down low. And we've done every other high school except Reynolds to this point. They were the first one to get their turf redone, but they're the last one to get their track redone. That's how it kind of works, so.
Reynolds had to wait on something.
They actually asked, it's not, the track isn't in great condition, but years ago, they asked to be put lower on the list because they want to potentially build a field house where if we do this new track, it would make it really difficult to build that field house. So we gladly put them at the bottom of the list.
That was nice of you, Cindy.
Yeah. Doesn't work that way too often.
How's it going with that new field house?
But I don't know where they are in the field house. We got to do this track, probably next or the year after next. And then this is kind of a planning document. Here's things that didn't make that top list. The previous list is $12,409,000. Those aren't all our high priority. We'd like to put more on there, but that's probably going to slightly outdistance the funds that they are predicted to have. So we don't like to ask for less than we think we can get, but we don't want to just overwhelm them. If we have to cut a project here or two, we may need to cut a portion of a roofing project or one of the infrastructure projects or something else. We don't know. It'll be a negotiation. So that's our second priority.
Springs HVAC replacement, that's not something that can be covered by ESSER money?
Yes, it can. Clark, help me with that. Did we just forget to take that out of there? Yep. Yeah, we just, we switched that to ESRA, right? I forgot to take it out. Clark didn't. I'm sure he told me. But being a second priority, it would never get funded anyways. But yeah, thanks for that. I will adjust it in, when you see it in June, that will be gone. And then we touched on the Hawk Creek modular purchase. Some of the benefits are that we have a central location and it operates kind of separately from the school very well. So we could put a program in there that could operate separately from Hawk Creek. As Clark said, compared to new construction, if we needed to do that, this would be a bargain, and we would avoid those lease costs that are simply lease, and then you've got to pay to have them removed. It was the way we had to do it, and we think we have an opportunity here to accommodate some of the programs that are growing that don't have a home. These modulars were built to a better spec than modulars that kind of off-the-shelf modulars. They meet current energy code. They have 2x6 construction. They were built to our specs. So while they have a good long lifespan, they're brand new. It's a good facility. Typically, we wouldn't be buying. We haven't bought modulars in how long, Clark? 20 years. I think that's true. But they're there. We think there's an opportunity here. we brainstormed potential uses, and there were more uses that could fit into this than it will accommodate. One could be a virtual academy. They need some sort of operating place. Occasionally, they have students coming in for testing, for tutoring. They have teachers. They get together. They're going to be a school. So it could be a good home base for them, and their operations could happen anytime during the day because it won't interrupt what's happening at Hawk Creek. We talked about maybe an assessment center, an intake center. Suzanne rattled off a whole bunch, but there's definitely programs out there that are growing, and the problem is everyone wants to be in this building. This building is full. It's full to the brim, and our departments are scattered and busted apart because there just isn't the room. If we start doing the musical chairs thing and start bringing those departments together, it's going to disrupt someone else. It will be incredibly costly and incredibly disruptive. This building also is at its limits of its height and size. It will be costly to add an addition onto this building because it will need to be considered by building code and constructed as a separate building. Even though it might abut this, it will have to be a separate building. That means it's kind of standalone, and you have to have a lot of fire protection on both sides. So it's a real challenge to expand this building. This could potentially relocate some folks that need a central location and are out at schools, and ease the pressure on this building, and maybe allow us to do some renovations to bring these departments together that are currently scattered. So the recommendation is to allow staff, finance, and such to try to figure out a way to find the money to pay for these and purchase these modulars, work with the superintendent, and if we can find a way that makes sense, and we've talked about a number of ways of doing it, to move forward with this.
Shirley, can I ask you a question about that? Mm-hmm. How much time is left on the current lease of those modulars?
July. We need to up it. So if you folks are in agreement, and in June you tell me and superintendent that, yeah, pursue that, we would begin negotiations with them immediately and say, hey, we're going to want to purchase these. This lease payment that starts in July needs to go towards that purchase, because they don't want to move them, really.
Right.
They really don't. So we would use that leverage to apply those lease payments towards the purchase price.
I was going with my question is, can you lease to own beginning in July? Because that's a quick turnaround to come up with funding to even initiate a contract for a purchase.
We're not going to come up with the cash by then. We realize that, but we need to approach them with this concept. And of course, we could continue to pay lease and then buy them at the end, but it's kind of, we're losing all those lease payments.
And you may have said this, and I might have missed it, if so, I apologize. What do you anticipate the cost to purchase?
I'd have to ask Clark to help me with that. Do you remember those numbers, Clark?
Cost to purchase this today?
So it's 28.65 times how many square feet? Yeah. No.
Total $500,000, $600,000?
Yeah, $500,000.
But this $28 figure that you're seeing takes into account if we lease these 2 more years, which we have to. And then, it's showing, it's ultimately, that's going to be the ultimate cost of Buncombe County Schools.
And the options for purchase would be like any other brick and mortar. It could be lottery, it could be 39, or it could be 40/42, or no?
Help me, Tina.
Okay. So it would have to be 39 or 40/42?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Clerk, did you say we have to lease these for 2 more years, or we can choose to purchase right now?
We could choose to
and the program that we've set up, yeah.
The amount for those 2 years of lease is in the construction budget,
Yes.
correct?
We programmed that
So
in.
those are funds that we could move towards the purchase.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
We'd have to get School Capital Fund Commission permission, but we would ask that in the fall.
But this just, I have been paying attention, but this decision has to be made by June or July, is that correct? July 1.
We need you folks to tell us if we should pursue this or not before July 1,
And so
hopefully in June.
that information to you would come after this work session today?
At the June meeting?
At the June meeting.
When you consider this, we make any changes we want to, and you accept this or not.
All right,
We would look for your direction to,
at that time.
on this recommendation, and then we would immediately go to work and contact them, because they're expecting us to just keep paying the lease to the end right now. But if we have a change of heart, we could say, nope, we're done July, take them away. We can't do that because we need them there, but they don't want to move them. If we can kind of purchase them now and
Yeah, it seems
apply
to-
those lease payments and have an agreement in place,
Right.
we'd be better off.
So you're going to pay it, or you're going to pay it and own it, or you're going to lease it and not own it, and
Not own
that's
it
what.
or lease it and then buy it at the end, it's kind of wasted lease money.
Sure, sure.
Chair, I just want to make sure, since this involves the School Capital Fund Commission, that Max is hearing us very clearly. Are we confident about that? Max?
Are you with us, Max?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me? Can you
I
hear
want to
me?
make sure you were there and hearing this, since it involves the School Capital Fund Commission, Max.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, and you heard the discussion?
I've been listening to your discussion, yes.
We were just checking to make sure, Max, if you want to know the truth. Thank you.
And Mr. Feely, so the logistics of this, you need us to, what you need the board to do is to give you direction to go and move forward, or not, but to move forward. And then at a future point, you're going to come back to us and say, okay, we have talked to them. This is what we've negotiated.
Probably in August.
Here's what we recommend. We can purchase, we can lease for the 2 years or 1 year, or 50% of the lease is going to purchase, whatever the details are. And we've identified this source of funding.
Right. And then, yeah.
Now we're making this
Now
recommendation
you'll
to
make
you
a
as a board
decision whether, based on.
to fund it.
Yes.
Got it.
Or not. Oh, we have to know that, too? Suzanne, that's your job. She can fill it up in a heartbeat, I guarantee you.
Can you go back, to the $12 million school capital, not that one, but the other slide. So how is most of this, because I know on an annual basis when you meet with them, the next slide is always presented. Here are things we see down the road. Is most of this already been in front of them? That this is...
From last year, most of it is.
Most of it. Is there
Yes.
something that jumps out that is new?
Well, the softball field, we didn't know if we could even do it then, so it was not.
That was not on there.
We didn't know how much it would cost or what, so that wasn't on there. All the infrastructure stuff, that was on there. It's been for years, and the roofing. It may not have been those particular sites because we reprioritized based on existing conditions. The lobby, the security upfits, they've been on.
And this request will go to them this fall, am I correct?
That's correct.
I didn't know if their schedule had changed with the pandemic or anything. Okay.
Right after school starts, they call for the priorities.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So could we get their permission to move forward on rebudgeting the lease funds to to go towards the purchase. Can we do that sooner than the fall, or
We
would that
might
have
be
to
able
wait?
to, depending on what the arrangement is. They would have to call a special meeting, which they have done in the past for both city and county schools when an issue came up and, hey, we need to move these funds. So they have the ability to do that. We have the ability to ask them. But worst comes to worst, we do it in the fall because the modular company, we've worked out an arrangement and we've told them what our schedule is, and we've figured it out by then. And we have your permission in August
Right,
to do it.
okay.
So the last slide is a review of the lottery. Tina touched on the security initiative, and we wanted to show you where we are on lottery right now. And you got to remember, every quarter we get about, and Tina, correct me if I'm wrong, about $400,000 per quarter, but it doesn't come right at the end of the quarter. But we've got, even if we do this security initiative, you can see minus $1 million, which we're recommending, and hopefully you will approve this evening. We still have 2.8 million for other issues that come up, and that will continue to grow as we get those lottery revenues, approximately $400,000 every quarter. You're not going to build a school with lottery revenues, but you can do a lot of these smaller projects and take some of the pressure off of capital outlay to, and this certainly did. This floated the boat, and it's a good, touches every school kind of project, so we highly recommend you approve this evening.
Thank you.
Point. It's the end. Finally. Questions?
Mr. Fairley, can you hear me? This is Max Queen.
Yes, I can.
Just one thing I wanted to clarify, the meeting dates of this Capital Fund Commission. As you know, we had been meeting in August, and that was when schools were all trying to get ramped back up. So we pushed that out to September for the first meeting when all the schools, or the two, Asheville City and Buncombe County, present their priorities. And then from that time, after we hear all the presentations, we take approximately 30 days and come back with the final decision in October. And that seems to be much a better way of approaching this, because having just the commissioners or the people on the Capital Fund Commission hearing that and expected to make decisions on basically a report in front of them without having time to digest it works out much better. But I would say, and I think you would agree, that over the past few years we have been able to really drill down into those information that's presented, so that when we do make the final decision, we've had opportunity to interact back with the school systems for clarification and that kind of thing. And we try to do it collaboratively when we do make final decisions, having you and people like you present in the room if there are any final decision or questions to be made before a final decision is rendered.
All right, thank you, Mr. Queen. Other
Yes, ma'am.
questions or comments from board members? Hearing none, I'm going to declare a 10-minute break before Ms. Swanger comes on. Secondary, do we have Max? We do? Okay, can we go ahead? All right, Ms. Swanger, I will recognize you to continue. All right, Ms. Swanger, I will recognize you to continue our program as we discuss ESSER funds.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Dr. Baldwin, members of the board. My co-chair, Jennifer Reed, and I will share with you where we are in the world of ESSER and the funds. As you've been listening to all of the needs throughout the district, we need to look at ESSER as a wonderful opportunity. So we want to tell you a little bit about the work that's happened so far. Want to talk about the process that we've been using in a very quick time span, and share with you the proposals as we move forward. So ESSER 2 and 3, not to be confused with ESSER 1, which Ms. Frisbee has already had in place and been using those funds for COVID relief. These are the very two large pots of monies that we have received as a very important means to help us towards recovery with our students. We want to think of these funds as elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds. And these funds are meant to reduce the spread of COVID or a COVID-like virus, to prevent the spread of COVID or a COVID-like virus, and in response to COVID. So we have to frame all of our requests in that mindset. We think of these funds as recovery, but more importantly, opportunity. This relief supplement came to us in the form that it was enacted on December 27th. It's taken a bit to get these from the federal level to the state, and we are on a very fast-moving train. As you can see, the different allotments, we have ESSER 2 at $22 million, and these funds are set to expire September of 2023. Remember, with all federal funds, they have a beginning date and they have a very hard stop date. If you do not spend the funds by that point in time, those funds go away. So, very time sensitive. As we were working on the initial allotment of ESSER 2's $22 million, we had the next fortune of ESSER 3 coming our way for $49 million. These funds luckily give us one more year to use them. So when we think about ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, we think about using these funds over 3 summers and 2 school years. So that's the frame of mind. We think in terms of planning in Buncombe County Schools in a 3-year cycle. So what we have selected to do as an organization, look at these funds together, think about a 3-year implementation cycle, and work from there. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. Because if you total these funds, you have over $71 million. Significant funding. In my tenure, we've never received anywhere close to that from federal funds. When we had Race to the Top, that was a $5 million grant. So you can see the vast difference in that. We have to think of these funds as temporary, but should have lasting impact. So every part of our decision-making has to surround that. We want to think about the whole learner. We want to think about our marginalized or our vulnerable populations. And then we want to think about what we can do with opportunity and with a future focus. It has been a quick process, as I mentioned earlier. Ms. Reed and I have enjoyed working with a district steering committee and our district leadership staff. I want to thank all of them for their work because it has taken a lot of people, a lot of time, and a lot of passion to get to where we are right now. From this group, Madam Chair and Ms. McMahon were members of this district steering committee. And we had about 25 people that worked really hard, and Ms. Reed will talk about that in just a minute. Okay.
So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the purpose of the funds. Really, purpose of ESSER funds is all about recovery. We're looking at categories of recovering from learning loss, and that's not just academic learning loss, but that's social emotional learning as well. We're thinking about how do we prepare our schools for reopening. We are open. We'll continue to be open this summer, and then we will reopen again at the beginning of the school year. So what measures do we need to take to make sure that that reopening is safe and successful? And then a large part, too, is looking at improving air quality as part of for reopening into the next school year. Again, it's all about recovery. It's all about what are we doing in response to COVID to recover, to move forward as effectively and efficiently as we can. Ms. Swanger mentioned the tight timeline, and it has been tight. We pulled together this district steering committee on March 16th. It did consist of 25 members. A variety of stakeholders were on that team, and we had students, teachers, district staff, of course, our 2 board members, and community partners. We met on that date and gave them the scope of this work. They quickly went into action and formed 9 different subcommittees to carry out this work. Those subcommittees you can see listed below, and they pulled in an additional 581 stakeholders just during the month of April into several meetings to do a needs assessment based on the criteria of their work. And that included a data analysis just to assess what the needs are before they came up with their proposals and next steps. By the end of April, April 27th to be exact, not that many days away from today, they came together. Every subcommittee presented their proposals and their budget plan, and the steering committee approved us moving forward with that plan. You'll see the next week there, that 3rd section is early May. That's this week. We have pulled together these proposals and the budget plan, and our goal is to submit that application hopefully tomorrow. And then at that point, what we'll do is await for approval from the Federal Programs Division at DPI. So what we need to keep in mind is that what we're presenting to you today is our proposal. It then has to go through this next approval process. It may be approved. It may come back to us and say we've got some suggestions or some amendments that need to be made. And once that happens, we can just immediately begin implementation of our plans.
Can I just interrupt you for one moment to clarify something that was confusing to me early on? We talk about this being a proposal as if it's like a grant proposal, and me with my nonprofit background, I think that means this is a competitive process and we may or may not get this grant. And so I think we just need to make it clear to the board and the public that we are guaranteed these funds. This process is just about making sure that we cross all the T's and dot all the I's in the right way so that we have something that they approve, and then we'll go forward from there. But we know that we will get this amount of funding. That's correct, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm going to delve just a little bit deeper into the process that our subcommittees went through. We ask our subcommittees with every decision that they make and the lens that they look through that they think about our 3 priorities of equity, social emotional learning, and academics that you can see there on the graphic. Once those proposals came through, we were able to kind of lump those together in 3 buckets or 3 categories that you see here. One of those buckets, and probably the largest one fiscally, is the academics and social emotional learning, which includes family and student support. We also have a bucket that focuses on air quality, facilities, and technology. And then we have this bucket called Other over to the side. Even though those 3 circles look like the same size, they're not necessarily financially proportional with each other. And that's important to note that the items you see listed here, though we've tried to put them neatly in one of these buckets, there's a lot of overlap in the services that we provide. I think it is noteworthy that these proposals in this plan focuses on direct services to students, direct services to families. We're looking at materials and supplies. We're looking at support to our teachers and staff through professional development and coaching. And of course, you'll see in each of those buckets there is a need for personnel. And Ms. Swanger will go into more detail about what that personnel request looks like.
The wonderful part of the process of having the subcommittees make reports based on their needs assessment and their data analysis and working with stakeholders was that the process was very organic. The needs came to us first, and then we had to match the budget and the allowable expenses to those proposals. $71 million, and we had proposals, much like the capital outlay process, of $30 additional million. So we were at $101 million. So we did have to make some adjustments. Do we have other funding sources? Is this something that really is a qualifier for this type of application based on the work that we've heard from the Department of Public Instruction? Or do we need to table it and talk about it at a later time? So we did have to remove about $30 million worth of proposals. So, but the beautiful part was the needs came to us as in the district fashion. So when you think about the budget projection, ESSER 2 funds have, both applications are similar, but there's two differences between ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. ESSER 2 has a mandate for summer learning. As you know, the General Assembly passed a law on summer learning, so we were already in coordination of planning our summer learning opportunities for students, which you'll hear about this evening. So high priority on summer learning in ESSER 2. We think that's a high priority for recovery, so it's included in ESSER 3. Again, thinking in a 3-year strategy. The ESSER 3 dollars have a learning loss component that is mandated that we spend at least 20% of that allocation on learning loss. That should be easy to do. That's $9 million, so we certainly have that covered. What I have to make sure that we understand, these are big categories from the subcommittees through what Jennifer just showed you, that these are the funding streams through the application process. So we have created estimates based on what was proposed, working closely with finance to do that, and we have a pretty good handle on year 1. We do not know the salary changes or what the programmatic changes will be for years 2 and year 3. So we have to know that these are estimates. We should expect these to change based on the work of having a grant, working through the outcomes of that grant, what strategies are working, what is not working, and what must be amended. There will be no changes to the scope of work once it's approved from DPI unless we do an amendment process and DPI approves that first. So it is a very tightly monitored grant system, very tightly monitored and audited. So we have to know that when this scope of work is approved and we begin implementation, we have to follow what we have stated that we will follow. And if we need changes along the way, we bring our team back together and we can create an amendment so that those changes can be made. So very meticulous process, which is very helpful when it's such a large grant. Again, we want these dollars to focus on whole learners, moving us forward into the future, and thinking in terms of our most marginalized students because of COVID. Again, everything must be because of COVID. Time is important to get us started, but we have time to spend the dollars based on the needs and what might come before us as we know more. Remember, this year last year we had no final academic data. So we're using 2019, and then we're using first semester grading. We are using attendance data. We are using all data points to support any of the line items that you see on the grant. If you look on the left-hand side, that pretty much are the big buckets within the grant application. We have to think about those unique needs of students, what educational technology is included, how we're improving our air, just how we're doing with learning loss. And again, as we look through all of those categories, most of those things are equipment, supplies, materials, professional development, but there are personnel costs and personnel associated to recovery that I'll go through in just a few minutes. In addition to professional learning and all of those items that we think we need to make sure that we are recovering students, we know that we will need additional people. And those additional people will be intense in terms of how do we help all of our students move forward? How do we catch them up? Or how do we enhance them if they have been doing okay as a result of COVID? But as any federal grant, and I think Madam Chair and Ms. McMahon will attest, it worries us to think about hiring staff for a period of time. Because as we have with any federal program, we know that it is a year-to-year kind of position. We know that dollars come to us and then these dollars end. And we can't expect to be able to place all of these positions in a new position once this grant goes away in 2024. So these are 3-year positions. What we would hope to do is work these folks out of a job, because that means we don't have the need. That means the grant did what it was supposed to do. We recovered and we enhanced. However, if we have opportunities through attrition, we think it's most fair to move folks from one funding source to another as we can. So that is always the intent. So let me talk a little bit about what these positions are of moving forward with ESSER $2. We know that social emotional learning is key. Just yesterday, Ms. Robinson and I participated in listening to our students be looked at for entry into community high school. And we do that every year, every semester actually, so that we know what are the true student needs in our high school. And we know that we have opportunities to listen and work with care teams and TIPS teams for our K-8. But knowing those most at-risk students and what their needs are, and has COVID impacted their needs? And Tanya will attest as well. Our counselors and social workers presented students for community high with needs that were very clearly COVID-driven. I heard a pattern of homelessness. I heard a pattern of anxiety. One young man was so afraid that his mother would catch COVID that he went to work with her every day. So he wasn't logged on because there was not computer access always where she was. We heard of the challenges of social emotional support needed. We heard that students had not been engaged because they were working. And I think you all noticed that with our chronic absenteeism when we presented that after first semester. Those haven't changed. Even though we are back in Plan A, some of our students are still not as engaged as we would want because they had the option to remain virtual. On a positive side, as we were looking through and hearing these students being presented, we were also looking in Power School to see what has happened since we have returned to Plan A. And the majority of those students, since we have returned to Plan A, if they returned to Plan A, their grades were improving, their attendance was improving. All of those things that we know matters. Going to school matters. Being in a classroom, having learning opportunities with peers matters. So we know that it's a matter of time, but we expect these SEL support staff to really work inside the classroom. Who are our very best teachers who use these skills and can model and help other teachers with these skills inside the classroom? So again, building capacity. Hopefully, as we build capacity, those positions will not be as necessary. The next one, special population support and development specialist. Well, that's a mouthful. That person will be in charge of leading our equity work. Are we ensuring that we are having all students represented in the way we teach through culturally relevant teaching? Are we making sure that that Title IX is being followed? Are we making sure that we are moving our district forward with all of our populations, especially those who have been marginalized? Mental health therapists, certainly necessary. Some of our students have not been receiving therapy and have not agreed to have therapy virtually, so have some makeup work to do there. We know counselors and social workers. We have one grant through state support funds called Gear Monies that Mr. Thompson has the ability to hire social workers and counselors. So he will use those monies first, and then ESSER will complete the 3-year package for paying those folks. Many of you may have heard from dual language families and the concern about not having access to that daily language interaction. So we think we need a coach to go in and, again, help in that fashion to make sure that those students are being caught up, or those students who are doing well, that they're exceeding. We have enough dual language classrooms in our district now that's about the size of a small or really a large elementary school. So as that program has grown, we haven't had anyone to really help that program and make sure that we're doing the right work. The role of an interventionist, or that should be plural, would be offering middle school and high school students interventions, especially at the higher levels. We call them Tier 2 and Tier 3. So honing in on what does that student need to be successful that may not be able to happen in the regular classroom. Much like a Title I staff does in the elementary and the intermediate, this would continue that form of support. Psychologists are certainly needed because we have not been able to use the data to test students until they were back in Plan A. So we know that we have to catch up and make sure that our students are, if they are qualifying for additional services, that they are able to be tested and moving forward. And our psychologists are also key on developing interventions. They're data experts, and we're really tweaking their role, and will tweak their role moving forward, which is another one of those opportunities. We know how we used to do it, and we know we can do it better, so taking that time to do that. I think you heard during Steve's report about first semester that some of our ESL students have not engaged. Some of them, we heard through these conversations with Community High, are working because parents were laid off and there were 4 children in the home and no one was working but the student. Again, that student has not been engaged, but we want that student to graduate, so we've got some work to do to make sure that happens. Think about occupational therapists. Those folks are key, especially for our youngest learners who have not been in preschool or who may not have been, it may be one of those 345 kindergartners who didn't come this year. They may not have held a pencil or a crayon. So we need those occupational therapists to work hand over hand with that student to learn that very fine manipulative skill. We have seen an uptick in behavior since we've been back. And so we know that we have identified that we need additional behavioral support, so we need a lead certified person to work inside our schools. We know that our newcomers, those students who are in year 1 of arriving in the U.S. school system, we know that COVID has impacted their world and their family's world. So how do we move them forward into a school system and get them into the right coursework and get them caught up? The district outreach specialist, that is like a Norma Brown position that we have in the Irwin district, and she is the fabulous liaison between students and families and higher ed and community for our families who may not speak English as a first language. So certainly that is needed to be replicated in all districts because, again, 19% of our student body are Latino students that need that additional support. Blended learning coaches, we have a similar position, but we know that this is where we think about the future. Our teachers turned on a dime, and we had devices in all student hands. And teachers were doing a fabulous job of teaching remotely. Then we brought some kids back, and they were teaching in that hybrid kind of fashion. We know how we agonized over what happened next steps with those teachers. We need to take what we've learned and what does it look like next year, because we do have to always be prepared to go back into a remote learning environment. So again, how do we do things consistently? What materials do we use? What professional development? How do I help you as a professional do technology better in your classroom? How do we personalize learning so we're moving students forward? Teachers, we are expanding the virtual academy as was alluded to earlier. Right now, we're looking at expanding K-5, and we have about 40 students interested. So again, reaching out, as Amanda mentioned, reaching out to those homeschool families, and Brandon is doing a fabulous job of inviting them to be a part of Buncombe County Schools, and we expect that number to grow. And we're very excited that our virtual academy will be a standalone school for next year, and that will make it a more equitable program for everybody as well. And probably the most important position in addition to the teachers on that page would be an ESSER program compliance coordinator. We know that with these dollars, we have to keep an eye on them every day so that we are in compliance and we don't get into a position of having to pay back these funds. So those are the certified positions that we're requesting. The non-certified positions, 19.5, that includes an HVAC manager that Clark needs to manage his 71 projects that have been included to improve air quality. Much relief from the proposition or the capital that you saw earlier. We need a true parent liaison in our Family Resource Center to help families with basic needs as well as workforce development and how to be a parent in a school setting. We need additional ESL students to support those students in their classrooms as well as behavior assistance. Our high school students, we have credit recovery we are offering this summer, but we don't think that may be enough based on the failures that we've seen for semester. So certainly support for high schools. We think one person to be at central office as a full-time Spanish interpreter will be huge as a way to include more families in what's ahead of us. And again, another important position would be the federal programs accountant. This person will be in charge of all purchasing and will work in finance and will make sure that everything is in compliance. And then because of the way that staffing has had to be dealt with in HR and communications have done a fabulous job of helping our school nurses with tracing, and when we have to exclude staff from school, that communications is key in quarantining. So we think a half-time position, at least to start the school, makes sense for that position. So again, these are to have lasting impact, but as these funds are approved, and if DPI is in agreement, we have to be on our best game so that we make sure that anyone that's hired with these dollars understands these are 3-year positions, but we will certainly help move into other positions through attrition as well as other opportunities as they arise. So.
Ms. Saul, could I ask a quick question if you could go back to that,
Sure.
to that chart? Sorry about that, Madam Chair, if it's okay at this time. So I want to make sure I understand 66 certified positions. Are these all strictly summer, or some of these, they're going to be, or are all of them year-round employees?
They could be a 10, 11, or 12-month employee for this period of the grant. For example, our teachers would be 10-month employees, and we have projected enough dollars to be in place for through the next 2 school years.
So we're going to hire X number of teachers, I don't know what the number is there, that will be working from, this is not just them working in the summer.
No.
This is working year-round. I'm at a loss for how we make that work as it relates to, is all of the funding for that, so if I'm a teacher coming into the system, or if I'm here, Am I contributions to retirement and to benefits and all those,
Absolutely.
all of that stuff is coming there. We're not having to
They are
get
full-time.
additional funding from the county commission or something like that. It's taking care of all of that.
These will be funded strictly by federal funds, and they will be paid, all of their expenses
All
will
of
be paid.
that's covered.
These do not include summer school employees because that is in a whole separate line item
Okay,
as a mandate.
thank you.
Ms. Swanger, I have a question. I noticed one position that just kind of stands out to me, and maybe it's just, there's a good reason for it, but I know that there's a lot of our schools that share school nurses. Is there an opportunity to include school nurse positions with these funds? Or are we not using those funds because of our relationship with MAHEC?
We have had such a good relationship with MAHEC that we have not expanded these funds to include an additional nurse. If it's something that becomes a future need, it could be brought to the committee, absolutely.
So is it possible that, say, could we at some point partner with MAHEC and maybe look for some additional grants to work towards having a nurse at every school as a goal?
It certainly could be discussed, absolutely. Right now, it has not come to the table because the most immediate needs seem to be the counselors, the social workers, and that.
Okay.
But that's the beauty of having time to have further discussion, look at the data, and determine what future needs. It might be that these needs work well for 1 year but have to be adjusted. But we want to be transparent with anyone that is hired as to what happens at the end. We don't supervise nurses, as you mentioned, MAHEC does. So we would have to see if that's an allowable contract expenditure. Most of these funds are for payment from Buncombe County Schools. One interesting component I should mention, we see a great health need, and we are partnering with United Way and an agency to be determined through United Way's work as to create a health center. And
That was going to be my next
and
question, if you
the
could
health
elaborate a
center-
little bit on that.
we are looking at offering a student and family health center at Irwin Middle School. And so we can include construction costs, and we will assign one of these mental health therapists in this line item to that program with the plan that whoever is the HQC that is running that, because we don't have skill sets to run that kind of operation. We would want them to transition and take this mental health therapist that we're paying for through COVID and them to assume payment for that person and keep it moving forward. So we're hopeful that that will be an allowable expense that will be approved.
Okay. And that might even be something that the Dogwood Health Trust could
Absolutely, and Dogwood has
partner
been in
with.
conversation with us as well. And I would love to see these at, in every single district.
Right. Well, I think it certainly fits the bill for the mission of the Dogwood Health Trust for community impact.
So once we have approval, the first line of business is to hire these compliance so that they are at the table with us and see the value and hear from the stakeholders, and then help us with implementation. This is a lot of money coming at one time, so we have to be very intentional so that we set it up for success from day one. We will certainly meet regularly with that district committee and keep working out through the different various stakeholder groups, and knowing that there wasn't an unbudgeted category that we could put a bunch of money in and look at it later. We had to put the money in each of those designated items, but again, knowing that once we start year one, we can always adjust based on the needs. And if this board has needs that would like us to look at, we'll be glad to do that as well.
Can you tell me a little bit, so when it says certified, The program compliance coordinator, is that specifically a teacher, or is there another certified skill set that you'd be looking for?
I would want them to have experience managing a federal grant. The federal world is very different, and the rules that they attach to these dollars are complex.
So what kind of person would we be looking for then?
I'm looking for a person that has leadership experience
Okay.
with some kind of federal grant. It doesn't have to be someone from the school system, but they should have school system experience.
Okay.
And we're creating that job description, and, every state in the nation has these funds.
Right.
And so we're looking and stealing ideas from, Colorado has a great website. Most of our states have good information, so most people are looking for similar things, especially the air quality. If you think about the HVAC work that we're proposing, every other district and state's doing the same. So that will be an interesting business to watch moving forward.
Right. Well, I was just confused because I was just wondering, since it's under-certified, I tend to kind of think of, people that hold licenses like, teachers and social workers and psychologists and what have you. And so I guess I was wondering about how that fit under the certified versus the non-certified.
The non-certified more is about the fiscal elements and keeping us purchasing the right items, following the bidding laws, and watching the dollars. And the compliance coordinator is watching the federal rules, communicating with Department of Public Instruction, making sure the application is current, making sure the scope of work is followed. So these two people will be key to working together to help us implement. And of course, our staff will be right there, and I'll be sitting there with them as well. It's a lot of money that we want to make sure that we are we're using to fidelity.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
And so as we think about, it's a wonderful opportunity, and we need to continue to think about not everyone is challenged or has an opportunity gap or an achievement gap or has something significant out of COVID, but we know that there are many who are. So we want to make sure that we're addressing the needs of all students. And this is student-focused money, and we will use it to the very best of our ability, and we will keep you informed as we learn more. Again, a very, very short window of time, and we need for this to have lasting change. The last piece of information I'll leave with you, we know that ESSER $4 may be coming down the pike as well, so there may be additional dollars. So that will certainly come back as what happens next steps. But again, looking at this as an opportunity, we know that this school year has been so unusual than anything we've ever experienced. We know that we have to put all efforts into recovery, but also acceleration and thinking about, we don't want to go back to the way we did school before. We know so much more, and we can move forward. Our students have only been in school under Plan A. When you think about this school year, this is why we need these dollars. Our students have only been in school under Plan A for 25% of their school year, coming 5 days a week, 25% of their school year. In Plan B, that's about 46% of that school year. And they were all remote for 29% of their school year. So we do have work to do. And thank goodness we have these funds to do so.
Thank you. Oh, you have a question, Mr.
Madam Chair, I
Bryant.
had one more, but Ms. Swanger, just to make sure I understand, because I think I'm missing something. So all of these fundings and these programs does include the things that we're going to do in the summertime, correct?
Correct.
The thing I didn't see up there, maybe it's coming later, is food and feeding those kids and the people in the school buildings during the summertime. Is that in there somewhere?
We are offering meals just as we have in snacks. Lisa will talk about that in just a little bit.
Okay.
So that's certainly part of summer.
Thank you.
All right, I guess it's time for food. Lisa Payne.
Madam Chair, as Lisa's coming up, I just want to make the board aware. Lisa, I hope I've got my dates correct. Tomorrow is the 8th Annual School Lunch Hero Day. And as you well know, we've got lots of categories of staff that fit in hero categories, but can't think of one any higher up on the echelon than Ms. Payne and our child nutrition staff. What an incredible job they've done starting March of last year. So just wanted to get that plug in.
Thank you. Thank you. And I actually went out to 3 districts day before yesterday and gave face coverings that have School Lunch Hero on them, and tomorrow I'm going out to 3 more. And to walk into those schools, especially the schools that are feeding children in the cafeterias, what a great, great, great feeling. So I know the person that prepared the food, and if I don't get you that meal while it's hot, somebody's going to be real upset with me, so I'm going to talk fast. And I welcome anybody to call me and come to the office. I'd be glad to go through things with you. But you have a PowerPoint in front of you, and it's just some facts. I'm not going to go through every one of them. Program analysis is in there, and the chart of accounts. The main thing, let's see, Barry, you may have to help me here. Is it a clicker? The main thing, do I have a remote? I don't have a remote. That should have done it. I'm going to skip through some of these.
Lisa, take your mask off. Thank you.
Free and reduced meal benefit program. On March 16, 2020, we pivoted from the National School Lunch Program to the Department of Health and Human Services Summer Food Program, where we remain today. We hear, but we don't have all of the details yet, that we're going to the seamless summer option, but we don't know when that's going to occur. So, Mr. Bryant, to answer your question, we are going to continue feeding people breakfast and lunch, but we don't know all of the details yet, but there will be meals available. So that's very important. These are just some numbers that you can look through. They're kind of the revenue, the changes that occurred, but I'm going to go fast, and please feel free to call me for follow-up. I just want to get you to your food. And you're laughing, Ann. A la carte sales, you'll see this year we obviously didn't have anybody to buy a la carte. It's kind of the roller coaster that we have been on as the enterprise fund. And then we're going to go here, these heroes we just spoke about. We have 178 school nutrition employees. That's a great number, but 2 years ago we had 230. So we are decreasing in staff through natural attrition. I'm very proud that there were no layoffs. Everyone was gainfully employed, but that is a big difference. These are the professionals.
That's because we're selling less meals? We're providing less meals?
Yeah, we really, really are. Even though that we served over a couple of million meals for summer feeding, we're still at 50% of what we normally would have done.
Only served a couple of million meals.
Yeah, but we wanted to serve 4 million, not just 2 million, but we did reach less people by not being in school. Very proud that we've got to B&C Agriculture, and our local foods were involved, and we serve those. And these are our community partners: Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, School Health Advisory Council, the Crop Walk, I'm on the board of directors, North Carolina School Nutrition Association, Buncombe County School Nutrition Association, Western North Carolina Cooperative, which is our purchasing group, and the Food Planning and Justice Committee for WNC. And then, of course, our Buncombe County Emergency Operations Center, which Mr. Huff is involved in, and I work with the Food Division. So I won't read through these. These are some of the management tools I use to manage the program. And the main reason I'm up here is that program analysis sheet that you have that kind of is where we are, the kind of the who's who of the finances of school nutrition. And if you look through that, that actually is grabbed from the chart of accounts, which is also in your packet, and I'll go there, that's just the front page. Look through your chart of accounts, please, in your spare time, because I know you don't have a whole lot, but this would take a few minutes, or come by my office and I'll walk through it with you. And this gives you the budget line item and everything you need to know to develop that program analysis. It does change from month to month based on what hits the books and what charges are there. So we're very fortunate. We had PRC 125 money, which put us in the black, which is a great place to be right now after this pandemic year. Compliance that we have to go under, we have administrative reviews, internal audits, external audits. And then that is a pre-COVID picture and our Injustice for All program, because I'm proud to say that all of our employees receive diversity training and are equal opportunity employers. So that was quick. I'm sorry it was brief, but I think for the sake of time, I did fly through it. Any questions?
I'm hoping maybe you can take a little more time with us.
Sure.
And I don't mind if my supper is a little cooler because of it, because this feels really important to me, because we get this program analysis for child nutrition, I think, every few months, along with our other financial account. And I'm usually fairly savvy with reading financial reports, and this one is just beyond me. I never can. So do you mind just sort of walking us through line by line on this program analysis and explaining what it means so that I can do a better job of providing oversight?
That average number months operating balance, as a school nutrition enterprise fund, we are allowed to have 3 months operating balance. If there is anything over that for 3 months, and this changes monthly, I would need to have a spend down plan. So that means I would reinvest it into the program, okay? That is very generous. We normally operate around 2 to 2.5. So that is certainly there because of the PRC 125 money. Then we go to gain or loss. That's showing a gain of $422,000, again, because of the PRC money that is there. And that will hopefully get us through the end of the year, and then we'll break even, which is our goal. So we're not nonprofit. We are an enterprise fund that wants to break even, okay? So we have our labor and benefits at 52 cents of a dollar, our food 31 cents of a dollar, which means we're operating at 52%, 31%, 2% in our food and supplies. We haven't bought any equipment. We pay direct cost, it's just some expenses. Then our indirect cost, and I'm looking at the dollar value and also looking at the percentages below that, is 100%, which is 11.3760% of our revenue that we pay back into the system to partner with the system to cover our electricity, our maintenance department investment, our facility, our layout for all of our partners that help us feed the children. And that's kind of it in a nutshell, but it's a lot more complicated than that. Ms. McMahon, I would love it if you'd come by the office and we just go through the chart and I can and show you the codes and all the resources. If you go back one slide where the management tools are, it shows the references I'm pulling from Cooks, I'm pulling from Link and Meals Plus, I'm pulling from Google Sheets that are manually calculated, and lots of resources. I collaborate with finance quite often, and we're watching numbers go back and forth and pulling to create the actual, but this is actually a computer program can pull all of this based on data that we enter.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, very good.
Our school nutrition program is self-supporting, is that correct?
That's correct.
I think that's very important to
That's correct.
note.
We're considered an enterprise fund, and we raise all of the money that it takes to pay these employees and to buy the food and all of this money that's calculated. For every meal that we serve, we receive a reimbursement rate from the federal government.
Okay.
Thank you for
Any
that.
other questions for board members? Thank you.
All right, thank you, and enjoy your dinner.
We usually do. All right, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn from this.
What about Deborah? Is she going to talk to us?
I was glad not to go last. Because Deborah's going to make me
Okay,
cry.
come on, Ms. Frisbee.
And Dr. Ball, we're tag teaming. Help us quickly.
Operational budget draft proposal, I guess this is what we're doing, huh? Barry Pace has to call in help.
Yes, what?
Call in help.
Just move our slide by enter. Ms. Frisbee and I are going to tag team on this. We're going to try to go into full press mode because dinner is ahead. So, Lisa, you put the pressure on us. I guess the good thing about this is that the vast majority of what we're going to present on our operating budget for 21-22 lives in prosperity. In other words, it can be used for years in the future as long as the public school funding strategy doesn't change and the resources don't change. So off we go. Anything you want to add? I'm going to show you two basic slides to understand public school funding for Buncombe County schools. These two slides are essential. And this essentially shows us where the sources of fundings come from. We're heavily, predominantly dependent upon state public school funds. You've heard me for years talk about the dilemma of the timeline. The timeline is by May 15th, legally, by state law, we have to send a budget request to the commissioners. That's so difficult because right now, the only hint we have of what the state budget's going to be for 21-22 is the governor's version. We're still waiting on the Senate and the House, and therefore, what we present on May 15th is only really 1/3, and it's so much of a crystal ball type projection. So that's what you're going to actually see. Second slide, again, very essential. We are a people business, if we're called a business. It makes sense, doesn't it, that 92% of our operating budget falls into salaries and benefits for people. We're very predominant in terms of people to work with our kids.
I like that term, human capital.
Human capital. Ms. Frisbee, you jump in at any point in time. Okay. This is an important slide because as we talk with the commissioners, and again, this is a term we've used for a number of years now, that I think fits so well, and that is the non-negotiables. And when we talk about non-negotiables, they all apply to the ability to take whatever the state does for salary increases, for retirement rate, health insurance increases, and it allows equitable translation to our locally funded personnel. So here they are, 714. And you can see the high percentage is in our teachers. And that's important because, again, very basic concept, which is true, I believe, for every school system in the state. The state does not fully fund teaching staff. It covers primarily our core subjects, our social studies, science, math, and language arts, for our health and physical education, for our arts, and for our world languages are three good examples that we depend upon local funding. Okay, this one's a little hard to read, so let me give you just some clarification on this. If you look on the left-hand side, those numbers 0 to 100 equate to the number of teachers. And then if you look at the horizontal list of numbers at the very bottom, those equate to the number of years of experience. So what we see, which I think is to be expected, certainly to some degree with the impact of COVID land, is that you see as we move closer into that 20 years to 25 years, there's that thought of the retirement, and you can see the impact of that. And so I think Mrs. Swanger and I were talking about this. I think we've identified our one teacher at 48 years, one of our outstanding teachers that also serves on a key committee. Won't give up her name, but that's truly a hero. Wouldn't you agree with me?
Definitely.
And an incredible teacher, by the way. Okay, and then if we break this down by categories and years of experience, what struck me the most is I immediately went to that high school for years 10 through 24, and you can see that. Now, again, that's relative to the particular year. It's a snapshot in time, but if you can see the numbers, that's where our heaviest percentage of our high school teachers fall. But then when you look at middle school, one thing that struck me is when I looked at the reduction in number of teachers in the 5 through 9 years of experience compared to 10 through 14, a little bit of a dip. And then at the total, again, what I talked about before is as you reach into that 20 to 25 years, you see again that reduction in numbers of staff, primarily due to retirement. I'm going to turn this one over to Ms. Frisbee because I've talked too much.
Thank you, Dr. Baldwin. So Ms. Swanger and Ms. Reed talked a lot about the ESSER II and the ESSER III money. I thought it was important for our board to know a summary of all the COVID funds that we have received since COVID started March 13th, 2020. So coming out of the gate, we had the Governor Cooper's Emergency Fund, and that money was allocated to us on March 31st, and that was $699,000. So we had to spend that by June 30th, but we were grateful for that. There was a quick turnaround on that. We also got the Governor's Emergency Education Relief money, and as Ms. Swanger mentioned, Mr. Thompson and Amy Dupree's department are utilizing those funds to hire additional personnel for social emotional learning and exceptional children, and that money expires September 30th, 2020. And then we come on down to the CRF money. This was state money. The first one was state money, the second one's federal money, and the CRF money was state money. We got $4.2 million there. There was lots of changes in how we could spend that money and the expiration date. We expended all of our CRF money or had it encumbered by December 30th because it just kept going back and forth. So that's off of our books right now. Then we start with the ESSER money, which is the first pot of the CARES Act money. And that money expires September 30th, 2022, and we've got $5.6 million of that, which we probably have about $2.5 million left right now. Then we have the SRF money. We had to apply for this money, and this was additional money that supported the EC department, and they're still using those funds. And then we go down to the two that Ms. Swanger talked about at length, and of course, these are our estimated allotments. And one is for the $22 million for ESSER 2 and then ESSER 3. And I will let you all know that that revenue chart that was the pie chart that we showed earlier, next year you're going to find that whole structure is going to change. You're going to find that federal funds is going to be your second largest funding source. So it will go state, federal, and county. So I thought that was just interesting to be mindful of that because we'll be getting $71 million that will be reflected on that revenue stream. And then here's just another breakdown of a pie chart of that.
But that 71 million will be over the course of 2 or 3 of our fiscal years, correct?
It will, but our plan, we have allotted and budgeted all the money. So it will be on the books immediately. It will just carry over each year.
I see. So it will show up in our budget for next year, the whole shebang.
Yes.
And then
we'll
pieces
use
of
it
will
and then
be carried forward.
it will carry it over. It will follow the same path as all the other federal programs, October through September. And that's just another representation of the different funds in a pie chart.
Madam Chair, if I could offer a thought on that.
Certainly.
For now, because if I don't, by 7 o'clock tonight, I'll forget. I think it would be, because that chart with the federal in it and the breakdown of state and local and federal is something that's always presented, Dr. Baldwin, to the county commissioners. I think it would probably be good that there be 2 pie charts, one with it, and one, this is what it would look like without these monies that are only coming to us for a 3-year period. Because otherwise, if you're not dealing with this all the time, somebody who looks at that over the course of a short amount of time and making budget decisions, it might perhaps look at that and go, well, look at all this new money. Now we've gone to this percentage, and I just think it would be important for people to understand that that's, A, not going to always be there, and B, this is where we would be had we not gotten this short-term allocation. So I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and just 2 cautions. Anytime you're looking at federal money, and we've never seen dollars like this of federal money, have we? $81 million. So when you see that, the public sees that and hears that, immediately, oh, this could be added into our school system. We've needed this for years and years and years. Now the funding is there. You have to remember that federal funds come with strings and restrictions. This is restricted money into categories. That's why it's taken 2 months for a team working diligently every day to put together the proposal to meet the requirements, the restrictions, the regulations of the federal funds. The second point to always keep in mind that, and I believe this is exactly where Mr. Bryant was going, and in federal funds, you receive them, but there is an end timeline. So they're only here, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, in a 2-year timeline or 3-year timeline. When you talk about recurring funds, personnel, staffing, new positions, that's the best example I can give you. So we have to put in place a plan and continue to work toward, what about if we hire that, Ms. Churchill, that school nurse in every school, and we find at the end of the 3 years, that has been miraculous in terms of what it's meant for our kids. The federal funds stop after 3 years. So what is the plan for sustainability? That's always the danger with federal funds. So a lot of great things are going to come out of this federal funding for COVID relief, but we have to have a good, solid game plan and keep in mind, always keep in mind the rules that come with receiving those funds. Okay, this is beginning the portion of what will be presented to the commissioners. As I said earlier, a majority of what we present is going to be the model to be used for years and years ahead, as long as the public school funding model doesn't change. And again, these are non-negotiables. Why? Because we don't have any negotiating to take place. The state budget will determine what these dollars look like, because it's all based on the percentages across the entire state. So we anticipate that we will see a salary increase from the state with certified and classified employees. Now again, danger, dilemma of the timeline. You are looking at dollars that represent the governor's budget. There are three components to the budget coming from the state: governor, Senate, House. We only have one of the three. And historically, traditionally, the highest of the three has been the governor's. So this is all the information that we have to work this proposal up. But you can see that totals $3.7 million of request. Non-negotiable 3 and 4, retirement increase, employer match. That percentage has gone up along with health insurance every year I've been here at central office. I don't know of a year we've ever had a no increase. And again, this is based upon the governor's budget. We don't know what those final percentages will be, but this is the best information we currently have available to us. So those are the dollar figures that equate to what that budget is recommending. $2 million. Health insurance, retirement. So those are the 4 non-negotiables, and that's really the base and the foundation of what we're going to present to the commissioners. And we will be very open and honest, just as we've already done, in saying that this is based upon the best information that we have available. We know that these dollar figures will change, and more than likely they will decrease. But this is the best information that we have. Now, the board requested that Ms. Frisbee and I look at potential, gather research, look at data for board stipend increase. So the first thing I'm going to ask everyone to zero in on, whether you're in this room or you're on your computer watching this presentation, is realize that school board pay has not changed in 33 years. 33 years. And so that was the first thing we did when we researched when was the last time. Now, needless to say, I have no doubt that for superintendents, I know that COVID has made you aware of things that you may not have been aware of in the past, and has created stresses that we've never seen in the past. And I say that in that the next request that a representation of this board requested was to look at school systems, the 4 in terms of ADM enrollment, the 4 next highest to us, and then the 4 that fall in sequence below us. So that's what Mrs. Frisbee has researched for you. The one change I would tell you on Harnett County Schools, that figure 1,275, that is a monthly figure. as well as the $1,221 for the vice chair and $1,167. That is per month. We just,
I left it off, sorry.
that's, no, just recognize that that should also include per month. And I'll let Ms. Frisbee turn that over to her, but I don't want to steal thunder, but as you research this, and these weren't the only systems that she called to get numbers, what you're requesting to research and to propose, it appears to be a trend across the state.
I am, my conversation with Iredell Statesville, she said that they were going to increase their board member compensation effective July 1st because it is pretty low. The gentleman from Alamance, Burlington, said theirs was a wreck, his words, not mine, and that they were proposing to increase it, but he didn't have any data to give me at the time, so.
So based upon the data that we were able to bring up, again, in consultation with the representative team from the board, came up with this recommendation, again, for you as an entire board. And that would be, and again, very important to recognize that it's been over 3 decades since this has been addressed. So to bring that up to the current year, the recommendation was $350 a month for the board chair to $1,300 a month for all other board members, moving from $250 to $1,100 per month. That would be an additional cost of $78,154. And thanks to Ms. Frisbee, because she also included FICA, which sometimes superintendents forget to do. So that is what we want to bring to you, and Madam Chair, certainly open for discussion.
Sure. Comments or questions from the board?
Let me take that back.
Can you go back to the previous chart, Dr. Bowen? So, no, not that one.
The next one.
I understand where this comes from, and I understand we've been woefully behind, I would say, for a long time. I have some difficulty with a 300+% increase in 1 year. And I speak not to you, but to fellow board members. I could have a lot more or a lot less heartburn at that being spread over 3 years or 2 years or 4 years or something like that. I have a difficult time with that much over the course of one budget year. There are a lot of folks in our, as we all know, in our communities that are in a lot worse shape and hurting in a lot more ways than what I am as a sitting board member. So I just throw that out there for consideration of this board, that for me personally, going up 100% or some equal number in thirds over a 3-year period would be easier for me to digest. And I'll just leave it at that.
Anyone else?
This is not addressing that point directly at all. This is not about the timing of the increase, but I do think that the increase is important from an equity perspective, and just to keep in mind that right now, all of us are middle class and able to devote a lot of time to this without being fully compensated. And if we want this to be a more inclusive board and to be open to folks who may not have the kinds of resources that we have, I do think it is important that we consider considerably increasing this compensation so that this position is a viable option for others who may not be privileged in the way that I am.
I guess the only response I would have to that, and I know that wasn't directed directly at me, is I've been a proud member of this board I'm in my 15th year, and those equity, I have a hard time with it this year. If this was 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, I might not have, but we've seen and witnessed so much people negatively impacted from a COVID perspective, and we don't have anybody potentially being new on this board for 2 more years, year and a half. So for me, it's just right now it's just difficult. It's just difficult. But I do understand and appreciate where that's coming from in that thought.
Yeah, and again, I'm not talking about the timing of how we do this, whether it's over the course, whether it's right now, bam, or over the course of 3 years or whatever, but this is just to affirm the overall direction of doing this, however we go about doing it.
And we as a board have been remiss for not paying attention to this for 33 years. So, to me, if we make this decision to do this, it's not just for this year and this board, it's for boards in the future as well.
But hopefully not 33 years.
Well, I hope they pay attention. Better than we. So where do we go from here? We appreciate the report. What do we do? My attorney's not here.
Well, won't we be discussing this as part of, we'll be approving the board later, the budget later.
That is correct.
And so at that point, that might be a time for us to discuss this and maybe make any changes that we might want to make.
That would be good.
5 minutes, I'll be right up. Hold on a second.
Okay.
I think that,
Right along. We caught him when he
Mr.
was
Campbell.
out to lunch. Yeah, in regards to the compensation for the board, we don't take any action now. We take this as a piece of information and...
Right, the action would be simply to include it in your budget. So if you want, you will have to make a final decision before the budget is submitted to the commissioners as to whether or not you want to move forward and how much you want to request, because it does require county commissioner approval, and the easiest way to do that is to make it a specific line item request in your budget.
Okay.
But we'll discuss that in the meeting later. We don't have to decide that now. We'll
Correct.
decide that in the public meeting later.
That is correct.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
My apologies. I'm dealing with legal issues for Buncombe County Schools as we speak.
And we
So-
appreciate you doing that.
so our summary, again, is subject to change. This is just simply a recommendation, per se, coming back to you. So that'll all be discussed tonight, and if there's any changes in that, then that will be determined by the board.
Exactly.
Okay. Any questions? Pretty good.
Hearing none, thank you very much for your presentation. And I believe it's appropriate at this time, Mr. Attorney, that I ask for a motion to, am I adjourning or moving on?
My memory is that your next session is separately noticed, so we
Yes.
would be adjourning the work session. And you could go ahead and call to order the board's dinner work session,
At this juncture.
and we can walk on down.
All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this work session.
So moved.
Thank you. Could I get a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, and thank you, Max. And that vote would be Pat Bryant. Okay, Amy Churchill,
Yes.
Amanda Simpkins.
Aye.
Max Queen.
Aye.
Oh, hi, Max. Cindy McMahon.
Aye.
Peggy Buchanan.
Aye.
And Franklin, okay? And then also, at the advice of our attorney, I am going to call the closed session to order and ask for a motion to.
And I don't think we want to do the closed session quite yet. We're just going to do the work session superintendent informational items. So you can
Okay.
just call that to order,
Okay,
and we'll walk on down.
right here, I will call the work session and dinner session to order right now. Thank you very much. We can move on down.